BBC. You actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yes, it's 3 p.m. and it's a bumper news day. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Let's get stuck in, shall we? The NHS is being told to come clean over the true extent of A&E waiting times on the day that Rishi Sunak unveils plans for 800 new ambulances and, of course, more hospital beds. The PM has vowed to deliver the largest and fastest ever improvement in emergency waiting times in the NHS's history. And let's be honest, it needs it, doesn't it? But the announcement was overshadowed by the omni-shambles of Nadeem Zahawi's sacking. It's a little bit of Tory turmoil to kickstart the week, ladies and gents. Also this hour, though, this coming Wednesday, so a couple of days' time, will be another whopping big day for strikes. Teachers, train drivers, university lecturers and security guards will all join 100,000 civil servants on the walkout. But today, I'm focusing on teachers because they're going on strike. They want an above-inflation pay rise, reportedly. Millions of children will miss out on school. But when you really drill down into the numbers, only around 47% of one union's teachers actually voted to strike. This, by the way, now is another big one for you. Are we just a piggy bank for channel migrants? GB News can reveal within the last year, asylum seekers have received payments of almost, brace yourselves, £160 million through government bank cards. The Aspen system, which stands for Asylum Support Enablement Card, easy for me to say, is a payment scheme that offers asylum seekers a subsistence allowance. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, will bring you the very latest on that. And another one to kickstart your week. King Charles has asked, believe it or not, the Archbishop of Canterbury to be the mediator in discussions with Prince Harry about attending his coronation. Why doesn't he do us all a favour and just stay in America? Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I'm going to focus on two topics for you today, OK? So, do you back a teacher's strike? I'll drill down into the numbers shortly. And should we be giving channel migrants pocket money? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Can't wait to hear from you. Now, though, it's your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon from the GB newsroom. It's 2 minutes past 3. The Prime Minister has defended his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about the investigation into Mr Zahawi's tax affairs and when. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after an ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
The government has promised the largest and fastest ever improvement to NHS wait times. Speaking during a visit to County Durham, the Prime Minister pledged 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to people's homes. The announcement is part of a £1 billion emergency care plan. Critics, however, warn there should be a bigger focus on staff shortages and pay. Downing Street has urged unions to step back and prevent a fresh wave of strike action. The statement comes as last-minute talks between teaching unions and the government are being held today in an effort to avoid strike action in England and Wales. Teachers are planning to strike on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and conditions. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Meanwhile, firefighters could vote for their first nationwide strike over pay for 20 years. The Fire Brigades Union says its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. Lancashire police are appealing for help as they continue their search for a woman who's been missing since walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bulley was last seen on Friday on a footpath in St Michael's-on-Wyre. She was walking her spaniel before going missing. Her dog has since been found. Police say they're extremely concerned.
Her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, and we appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward.
A 16-year-old boy charged with murdering a 15-year-old girl in Northumbria has been remanded into custody. Holly Newton was found with stab wounds on Friday afternoon near Hexham and died in hospital. Her family have paid tribute, describing Holly as a much-loved and bubbly girl. The teenager's next court appearance is set for Wednesday. Boris Johnson says Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The comment was made during a phone call after Mr Johnson visited Kiev to show support for Ukraine. The former Prime Minister made the claim in a BBC documentary. The Kremlin has described it as a lie.
He threatened me at one point and said, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would only take a minute or something like that, jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was taking, the sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have, he was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate.
The personal data of around 10 million JD Sports customers may be at risk after the company was hit by a cyber attack. The sportswear chain says hackers may have accessed private information, including email accounts, phone numbers, and the last 4 digits of bank cards. It affects orders placed between November 2018 and October 2020. JD Sports says it was contacting affected customers. This is GB News. More from me shortly. Now, though, it's back to Patrick.
Right, loads to crack on with today. We've got the NHS, we've got teachers' strikes, we've got other strikes, of course we have. It wouldn't be a Monday without loads of strike action, and we're also, of course, revealing the true extent of the piggy bank that we have become when it comes to channel migrants. But let's get cracking with the Prime Minister, because he's promised that the government's plan for emergency care will deliver the largest and fastest ever improvement in emergency waiting times in the NHS's history. And let's be honest, it needs it, doesn't it? Rishi Sunak was speaking during a visit to County Durham earlier today as he pledged to fix ambulance delays and the crisis in A&E, providing 5,000 extra hospital beds and 800 new ambulances through an investment of £1 billion. His announcement was somewhat overshadowed, though, as Rishi Sunak continues to face increasing pressure after sacking Nadeem Zahawi, the Tory party chairman, former Tory party chairman now, for breach of the ministerial code. Rishi Sunak says he acted decisively as he stressed the importance of integrity.
We have an independent advisor. That's what the government has. So it's not me who's doing it. And what I asked when all these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi, I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. And then on the basis of the facts, which he did relatively quickly over the course of last week, I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past. What you can hold me accountable for is, like, what did you do about it? What I did as soon as I knew about the situation was appoint somebody independent, looked at it, got the advice and then acted pretty decisively to move on, because that's what I think all of you deserve from me and from government.
He's getting a bit less wooded in front of people, although he is constantly talking about crises and crises and crisis, isn't he? I welcome to the fray now our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, who's in County Durham and watched the Prime Minister's speech earlier today. Darren, if it's all right with you, I'll start with the hospital stuff, the NHS improvement plan. 5,000 beds, 800 ambulances, but no sign of a whopping great big pay rises for staff. Talk me through it.
No, there's not. And actually, this money is also not new, this £1 billion the government have announced today, Patrick. It is part of an allotment of money, extra money, it must be said, though, that was put aside last November, announced by the government back then. So in many regards, of course, it is welcome. You're right in saying the backlog is pretty big. It's never been as big in the National Health Service. And this is a period in time in which there is enormous pressure. The government not willing to use the word crisis, but almost everyone else is. I think the big question beyond the headline figures of extra ambulances and indeed extra beds, which clearly will be welcomed by all, is who's going to staff these ambulances and these hospital beds, because at the moment there's 1 in 10 vacancies in the NHS that currently are not filled. If there is going to be an attempt to recruit more people, where are they precisely going to come from? And in addition to that, we heard today from the government, as you say, trying to get down some of these targets, and they've set themselves new targets, if you like, by March of next year when it comes to waiting in A&E for no more than 4 hours. They want to get that to 75%, but the original target pre-pandemic was 95%. It's the same with when you have to wait for an ambulance if you had a heart attack or a stroke. Again, the official target is 80 minutes. The government has set a target of 30 minutes. Now, they would argue things are pretty bad. The pandemic had a massive impact and it will take time. And that's the point I think we all need to take away from today, Patrick, is this is going to take time. This is not something that's going to be sorted in the next couple of weeks or months. This backlog is going to be with us for years and years, irrespective almost of how much resource the government feels it can chuck at it.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm going to be talking in a matter of minutes, actually, to a doctor in the NHS to get his take on the announcements today. But another thing that was inevitable, anyway, the fact that it was going to overshadow some of his NHS announcements today, the Zahawi sacking. From where I'm sitting, Darren, Rishi Sunak might have made a bit of a Horlicks of this. He said he wasn't going to sack him initially. He was going to wait for the results of this inquiry. There was an inquiry. Nadeem Zahawi's playing it like a little bit of a kangaroo court, and now he's gone, which he potentially was always going to do. Again, talk me through it.
Yeah, I think the big problem is that the Prime Minister at every turn tries to make these big announcements, try to focus on policy, those 5 commitments he has that he set out at the start of the year. And yet, almost with every week, he's having to deal with some political scandal or row or another. And yet here we are again, as you say, talking about Nadeem Zahawi. Now, the Prime Minister's point today that he acted quickly on this, that he appointed his number 10's ethic advisor to look into it, and then when he received the report within, we believe, an hour or so, had called up Nadeem Zahawi to effectively sack him. I'm not entirely convinced by all of that. We have to remember it was a Prime Minister's question time a couple of weeks ago that Rishi Sunak said that all the questions about this had been answered. That simply was not the case. And this idea that also it's just emerged, even in the last couple of weeks, is frankly ridiculous. There's been questions about Nadeem Zahawi's tax affairs for years. It was a big issue during the leadership campaign last year. So I'm not entirely sure that he did deal with it quickly. But we are where we are. And as I say, it just feeds into this sense that he's just not able to keep the ship tilted around sound government. There's lots of allegations still continuing about Dominic Raab. They're being investigated. And all this being reflected, must be said, Patrick, finally in the polls, which are pretty bad for the Conservatives at the moment. I mean, almost Liz Truss level bad. New one today, Labour on 52 points, the Conservatives on 25. In addition to that, Rishi Sunak's personal ratings, which have been better than the Conservative Party, also going in the wrong direction.
Well, the Daily Star might have to get that lettuce back out again. Darren, thank you very much. Darren McCaffrey there, our political editor. I can't help but wonder whether or not, in trying to please everyone here, Rishi Sunak has actually pleased nobody. He wanted to say, well, look, I'm doing an inquiry into this, which means that the Tory supporters of Nadeem Zahawi could be able to say, well, OK, he didn't just jump to conclusions and sack him, but a lot of people, of course, did want him sacked initially. In the end, he's ended up sacking him after quite a rushed inquiry, and I'm not sure anyone's particularly happy as a result of that. Now, just a quick reminder, what I've got coming your way very shortly is going to be teacher strikes, because I want to know whether or not you think they should be going on strike. Some interesting figures there, not all of them as straightforward as it might seem. And also, we've got some revelations about the amount of money that we are giving as a piggy bank anyway and spending money to channel migrants. Get your views coming in on them, gbviews at gbnews.uk. But let's go back now to Rishi Sunak being in County Durham and that £1 billion pledge for the NHS. And I'm very pleased to be joined now by Dr Tolu Adepeju, who is an NHS doctor, who joins me now. Thank you very much. What's your initial take on 5,000 new beds, 800 new ambulances and £1 billion?
Oh, 5,000 new beds. Welcome. 800 new ambulances. The problem we're having with ambulances at the moment is obviously you're having a whole queue outside of ambulances. They can't drop off patients fast enough to obviously get that turnover and pick up new patients. If we add 800 new ambulances to that, it kind of compounds the problem when you think about it. 1 billion, I mean, at this point, any money invested in NHS is obviously a good thing, but the money needs to be invested in the right places, like you've said, in terms of staffing.
A bit of a tricky choice for some people, I dare say, like yourself, working in the NHS at the minute, which is a choice between wanting a pay rise yourselves, fair enough, and knowing that the government has to find the money for more resources like this in order to make the NHS work. Is that a bit of a catch-22 for you?
I mean, yeah, it's a massive catch-22 because obviously you want the money to go in the right places, but if we're making all these changes or we're making all these new beds, where are the nurses that are going to look after all these patients in all these new beds? Where are the people who are going to look after all these new patients that are coming with these new ambulances? It goes hand in hand with staff. And if you can't increase the level of staff, and you can't increase the level of service you provide.
When you obviously have presumably a lot of friends who work in the NHS and in the medical profession as a whole, if you're being honest, do a lot of you regret going into medicine now?
No, of course not. I mean, you never regret going into medicine because the reason you went into medicine in the first place, it wasn't because of any of this, wasn't because of any of the politics. It was to help as many people as you can. And we do get to do that, but the conditions need to be right, not just for us, but also for the patients as well. Because at the end of the day, that's our most important priority, to make sure that patients are healthy and in a safe environment where we can provide the best care. If you're being really honest, like we've just spoken about there in terms of the resources, so what Rishi Sunak has said today, for people just joining us, 5,000 more beds, 800 new ambulances, £1 billion, right, OK, on top of a couple of other bits and bobs as well, more staff. He wants more staff handling the 111 calls, outside care, talk of virtual wards. Just on that, actually, I will ask you, will virtual wards actually work, in your opinion? This is people who are in their own homes who can, I don't know, presumably access some kind of laptop and get care that way. Does that work? I mean, obviously they're trialling it at the moment, and it's difficult to tell if it works or not because you have to then see what the effects are from obviously these virtual wards. I mean, I'd say obviously it's better to see a patient in person because then you can make a clinical judgment based on that. And some cases don't actually need to be seen in person, but then how do you determine what patients are seen virtually and what patients are seen in person? It's a bit of a slippery slope, but there's still a lot of kind of bugs that they need to fix with that. OK, all right. You seem a little bit downbeat, if I'm being honest, about what Rishi Sunak has had today. I suspect that you've maybe been promised a lot in the past or not promised what you do want. Do you realistically think that, in your opinion, as someone who works in there, for people like yourself to be happy, you need all of the things that's been promised today, plus a big pay rise as well? I mean, yeah, I would agree with that. The NHS does need a lot of help at the moment. All the things that have been promised, yes. A big pay rise, yes. Being able to keep staff retention, yes. And essentially being able to create a safe working environment. I feel like all these things put together can make for a better and stronger NHS. OK, all right, look, thank you very, very much. Great to have you on the show. Dr Tolu Adepeju there, who is an NHS doctor, just reacting to Rishi Sunak's announcement earlier on. We're going back to Westminster now because MPs are debating the minimum service levels bill, which aims to introduce a law which would force certain public sectors to maintain a certain level of service
on days workers walk out. It's kind of like anti-strike law that we've been talking about a little bit. Trade unions, obviously, strongly oppose the plans as they prepare for the biggest day of industrial action in years. That's due on Wednesday, when teachers, train drivers, university lecturers and security guards will join 100,000 civil servants in a walkout. But today, in fact, I think maybe right now, actually, last-ditch talks are being held to resolve the teachers' pay dispute. So, the National Education Union has announced 7 days of strikes in England and Wales in February and in March, with the walkout on Wednesday expected to affect more than 23,000 schools. There are some interesting stats on this, though. Like, when you look at the amount of people who voted to strike, this is in England alone, it was 90%, but that was of 53% of members of that union who took part. So if you really work it out, then actually it's nowhere near 90%. Of course, is it? It's 90% of 53%, which I think lessens it a little bit, do you not think? The idea now that every single teacher in the UK is up in arms. When you look at the fact that it's maybe going to be around 4.5 million students who would presumably miss out on an education. This is in the wake of the lockdowns and the fact that their education suffered as a result of that. And teachers do want quite a large pay rise above inflation. I want your views on this. gbviews@gbnews.uk. Would you back a teachers' strike? Let's talk now to GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. You are there for us now at the scene, as it were. How are these talks going? Do we know anything yet?
Well, we don't know anything, but we should find out imminently. So talks at the Department for Education behind me began at 2 o'clock between Education Secretary Gillian Keegan and the joint secretaries of the National Education Union, that's Kevin Courtney and Mary Bousted. Kevin Courtney and Mary Bousted, before the meeting, did not seem to be terribly optimistic. They said that unless a serious and substantial better offer was made, that the strikes would go ahead on Wednesday. But the next teacher strike is not due to be till the 28th of February. So they're saying that there is time possibly to avert that. That would be the second day in a total of 7 days that teachers in England and Wales have voted to strike. Of course, there is rolling strike action across different regions in Scotland this week. Now, so far, the government have held really quite firm, haven't they, across all these sectors, saying we can't give you more money, we can't afford it, it would simply embed inflation. Rishi Sunak this morning was saying he would love to give public sector workers much more money, but that would only make inflation worse, that they have to focus on getting that down. Now, Gillian Keegan is a much more emollient Secretary of State than some that have come before. And these union officials also are more emollient than somebody like the RMT's Mick Lynch. But that does not mean necessarily that a breakthrough is imminent. In fact, I would say if you had to place a bet, it looks like still 4.5 million children will be affected by these strikes on Wednesday. And that's affecting some 23,000 schools, and also, of course, millions and millions of parents are going to have to either work from home or take holiday or take unpaid leave to look after the children. The impact of the teacher strike in particular goes far beyond the individual students and, you know, really into the wider economy as well. So I would say don't hold your breath, but we should have some news shortly.
Well, we'll bring that to our viewers and our listeners as you guess it. Catherine, thank you very much, as ever. Catherine Forster, GB News' political reporter. We are awaiting with bated breath the results, even though I suspect we might know them, of this negotiation between the government and the teachers' unions. I'm going to be returning to this throughout the course of the show because I suspect many of you do have children. I suspect many of you were up in arms at the length of time that kids were off school during the pandemic and all of this. And you're very concerned about what you're going to do in terms of organising childcare as and when teachers go on strike. The question for me is one of legitimacy in all of this, which is what are teachers paid now? Is that enough? They're offered a 5% pay rise. Apparently, they want an above-inflation pay rise. Do you think that's too much? Do you think the number of children who may suffer with this, 4.5 million supposedly, is that unfair on the kids? OK? And as well, on top of that, we're also looking at the legitimacy of this strike action in general. National Education Union there took a ballot on it. 90% is the figure that they keep banging on about. 90% of people said they voted to strike. Well, that's OK, but supposedly the turnout was only 53%, so that takes the gloss off it somewhat, doesn't it? I want to know what you think about this one. The teachers' strike. Are you in favour? Now, look, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and coming up, reports that King Charles has asked the Archbishop of Canterbury to help encourage Prince Harry to attend his coronation. But would it be more or less of a distraction if Harry and Meghan just stay away? We're also going to be revealing to you the shocking amount of money that you, the British taxpayer, is giving Channel migrants as pocket money. You will not believe it. I'll be back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back. Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind, and we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Yes, welcome back, everybody. Just a quick email here from Brian. The level of benefit payments, hotel accommodation and all the peripheral attention from doctors, dentists, etc. to channel migrants is a national disgrace. And what Brian is referring to there is a topic that I've got coming your way very, very shortly when we welcome Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, into the studio. He is revealing to you, live on air, how much pocket money, essentially, the taxpayer is giving to channel migrants, the ones that we've got staying in hotels. Make sure you stay tuned for that. But now, the King has reportedly leaned on the Archbishop of Canterbury to ask Prince Harry to attend his coronation. The monarch is said to hope Justin Welby can come to some sort of agreement with his 2 sons that would allow the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to attend the coronation in May. So King Charles is said to believe Harry and Meghan's absence would be more of a distraction than if they both attend. And I suppose that's the big question, isn't it? Would it be worse if they came or if they didn't come? And here to pick through the bones of this one is royal broadcaster Helena Chard. Helena, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. So the Archbishop of Canterbury, why has he been chosen?
Well, I mean, he is the right person. He is brilliant. His background, his business, he leads by the heart. He knows the royal family well. He's there. If anyone can do it, he can. He's a real people's person, and he just knows them so well. He actually communicates with both Harry and William separately, and he wants good for all.
I was wondering whether... I was wondering, Helena, whether or not the Archbishop of Canterbury was still mates with Harry, because Harry and Meghan appeared to lob him under the bus a little bit during that Oprah interview, didn't they, saying they had that old secret wedding? I mean, that would have been a crime if that was true.
You know, Justin Welby, he is not going to be fazed by anything. He leads from the heart. You know, he wants the best for everybody. We do know, however, he was an intermediary after the late Queen Elizabeth's death between Harry and William, and that was obviously some time ago. And, you know, if this was a perfect world of make-believe, yes, it would be wonderful, I think, for Harry to be there with Meghan. Obviously, his King Charles' son, he's obviously wanted to be there. But, you know, we have to remember that this is a time, the coronation is a time where everyone comes together. It's a real positive vibe. And this is a coronation. This is King Charles' moment to shine. And this is amazingly the international law, you know, institutional law.
Well, you mentioned institutional there, and this is one of the reasons I had assumed that after Oprah, Netflix, the book, a series of interviews, that Harry wouldn't want to be anywhere near this thing. I mean, institutional racism, accusations around that kind of stuff for the royal family. Why on earth would he want to be at his own father's coronation in a country, by the way, which he doesn't appear to like much anymore?
Well, you'd say that, but at the end of the day, we have seen how Harry has been. I think I do feel sorry for Prince William. It's very hard to obviously, how can you bring some people together amicably in such a short space of time? Of course, we want everyone to unite and lead by the late Queen's example. You know, we want unity. We want everyone to get on, but this takes a long time. And as I see it, Prince Harry is an opportunist. How can we stop? How can there would have to be something laid down? There'd be NDAs. You know, what concessions would Harry need or want in order to be here? Because, again, it's not about Harry and Meghan. It's about the coronation. So how do we stop the front pages? It is
a sorry state of affairs, Helena, isn't it, when you essentially have to try to get the King's own son to sign a document to say, please don't wear a wire to my coronation. I mean, it does make the mind boggle a bit to how far we've come. But just lastly, sorry, Helena, in your opinion, would it be more of a distraction if Harry and Meghan are there or if they're not there? Because that's what this seems to centre around.
I think it would be more of a distraction if they were here, because I cannot see how things can be ironed out in such a short space of time. You know, in the perfect world, it would be great to have everyone together. And as I say, it would be a positive vibe, but I cannot see it somehow. So in my viewpoint, you know, I guess to receive an invite and, you know, to politely decline. To
politely decline. I'm with you on that one. Helena, thank you very, very much. It's always positive vibes when you're around, that's for sure. Helena Chard there, royal broadcaster. Yeah, all right. Happy Monday, everyone. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys on GB News. Now, the government is facing criticism. It's a big one, this, over a debit card scheme for asylum seekers, which paid out almost £160 million last year. We'll add that to the hotels, we'll add that to the Border Force, we'll add that to the RNLI, we'll add that to your GP bills, we'll add that to absolutely everything, shall we? 160 million quid's worth of your money going on pocket money for Channel migrants. Our Home and Security editor, Mark White, will have the very latest for that. But now, though, it's your headlines.
Good afternoon, I'm Tamsin Roberts in the GB newsroom. It's 3:33. The Prime Minister has defended his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about the investigation into Mr Zahawi's tax affairs and when. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after an ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
The government has promised the largest and fastest ever improvement to NHS wait times. Speaking during a visit to County Durham, Rishi Sunak pledged 800 new ambulances, 5,000 more hospital beds, as well as expanding urgent care to people's homes. The announcement is part of a £1 billion emergency care plan. Critics, however, warn there should be a bigger focus on staff shortages and pay. Downing Street has urged unions to step back and prevent a fresh wave of strike action. The statement comes as last-minute talks between teaching unions and the government are being held today in an effort to avoid strike action in England and Wales. Teachers are planning to walk out on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and conditions. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Further strikes are planned for February and March. Police are appealing for witnesses as they continue their search for a woman who has gone missing in Lancashire whilst walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bulley was last seen on Friday on a footpath in St Michael's-on-Wyre. She was walking her spaniel before she went missing, although her dog has since been found. Police say they are keeping an open mind about what happened, but do not believe Miss Bulley was attacked. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News.
He's the king of breakfast TV and he's back. Eamon Holmes back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News.
Let's cross live now to the House of Commons and hear from the Health Secretary, Steve Barclay.
Specific trusts, together with significant investment in these new ways of working, including a £14.1 billion funding boost to health and social care, as set out in the autumn statement. Today's announcement is the second of 3 plans to cut waiting times in the NHS. Our elective recovery plan is already in action, virtually eliminating the backlog of 2-year waits in England. And our primary care recovery plan will be published in the next few weeks to support the vital front door to the NHS through primary care. And today, together with NHS England, we are setting out our plans to reduce waiting times in urgent and emergency care through an increased focus on demand management before patients get to hospital and greater support to enable patients to leave hospital more quickly. That will be through care at home or in the community, supported with a clinical safety net. And in addition, this plan sets out how we will adopt best practice within hospitals, learning from those trusts that have displayed the greatest resilience in meeting the heightened pressures this winter. Mr. Speaker, today's announcement on urgent and emergency care does not sit in isolation. It is part of a longer-term improvement plan building on the legislative change enacted last year to better integrate health and social care through the 42 integrated care boards. Those became operational in July last year. This in turn was prioritised for additional funding through the 14.1 billion announced for health and social care in the autumn statement. Now, following the spike in flu cases over Christmas, with inpatient flu case admissions 100 times that of the previous year, and that spike having extremely quickly a sevenfold increase into December, we announced 250 million of immediate funding on the 9th of January for the pressures this winter, giving extra capacity to the emergency departments to tackle those patients fit to leave hospital who were delayed from doing so. Today's plan, developed in partnership with NHS England and social care partners, builds on those actions and that investment as they set out to the House earlier this month, as we put in place the more substantive changes required to enable the NHS to have greater resilience this time next year. To do so, this plan involves embracing technology and new ways of working to transform how patients access care before and after being in hospital. That in turn will help break the cycle of emergency departments in particular coming under significant strain in winter. Mr. Speaker, our plan has a number of commitments that are both ambitious and credible. First, we are committed to year-on-year improvement in A&E waiting times. By next March, we want 76% of patients to be seen within 4 hours. In the year after, we will bring waiting times towards pre-pandemic levels. Our second ambition, Mr. Speaker, is to improve ambulance response times, with a specific commitment to bring Category 2 response times, those emergency calls including for heart attacks and strokes, to an average of 30 minutes by next March. And again, in the following year, we will work to bring ambulance response times towards pre-pandemic levels. I'm pleased the College of Paramedics has welcomed the plan, saying, quotes, "It is pleased to see a strong focus in the recovery of those people in the Category 2 cohort." And of course, this will not be the limit of our ambition, but it is vital we get these first steps right and that we're credible as well as ambitious. To put these targets in context, achieving both would represent one of the fastest and largest sustained improvements in the history of the NHS. Underpinning these promises, Mr. Speaker, is one more essential commitment, a commitment to better data and greater transparency. On data, the best performing hospitals have benefited from the introduction of patient control centres to quickly identify blockages in a patient's journey, and e-bed management systems to speed up the availability of beds when they become free. Through this plan, we will prioritise investment in improving system-wide data, both within the integrated care boards and on an individual trust and hospital site basis. This will allow quicker escalation when issues arise and a better system-wide response when individual sites face specific challenges. On greater transparency, for some time, voices across the NHS have called for the number of 12-hour waits from the time of arrival in A&E to be published, something I know the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has long campaigned for, and I can see the Honourable Lady nodding her head. And indeed, there has been criticism, including from the benches opposite, of the government for refusing to provide this transparency. Instead, the data published to date has been a measure of 12 hours from the point of admission and not arrival in A&E. Mr. Speaker, for the commitment to transparency to be meaningful, we must be prepared to publish data even when that transparency will bring challenges. And so today I can inform the House that from April we will publish the number of 12-hour waits from the time of arrival. Dr. Adrian Boyle, President of the Royal College of Emergency Medicine, previously said, and I quote, "The full publication of this data will be an immensely positive step that could be the catalyst for transformation of the urgent and emergency care pathway that should help to improve the quality of care for patients, and I hope it is a transparency that is welcomed across the House. Mr. Speaker, our plan focuses on 5 areas: setting out increased capacity in urgent and emergency care, growing the workforce, speeding up discharge, expanding and better joining up new services in the community, and making it easier for people to access the right care. Action in each area is based on evidence and experience, learning lessons from the pandemic and building on what we know can work. More than that, we're backing our plan with the funds we need, and the government is committed to additional targeted funding to boost capacity in acute services and the wider system. That is why, Mr. Speaker, this package includes £1 billion of dedicated funding to support hospital capacity, building on the £500 million we provided over this winter to support local areas to increase their overall health and social care capacity. Taken together, Mr. Speaker, this plan will cut urgent and emergency care waiting times. It will do so firstly by increasing capacity with 800 new ambulances on the road, of which 100 are new specialised mental health ambulances. This comes together with funding to support 5,000 new hospital beds as part of the permanent bed base for next winter. Secondly, by growing and supporting the workforce, and we are on track to deliver on our manifesto commitment to recruit over 50,000 nurses, with over 30,000 recruited since 2019. And the NHS will publish its long-term workforce plan this year. We're also boosting capacity and staff in social care, supported by investment of up to £2.8 billion next year and £4.7 billion the year after. Thirdly, by speeding up discharge of patients who are ready to leave hospital, including freeing up more beds with a full rollout of integrated care transfer hubs, like the kind of successful approach I saw this morning at the University Hospital of North Tees. Fourthly, by expanding and better connecting new services in the community, like joined-up care for the frail elderly. This includes a new fall service, so more elderly people can be treated without needing admission to hospital. Virtual wards are also showing the way forward for hospital care at home, with a growing base of evidence showing that virtual wards are a safe and efficient alternative to being in hospital. Our aim is to have up to 50,000 people a month being supported away from hospitals in high-tech virtual wards, of the sort that Watford General Hospital has been pioneering, which I saw last month. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we're improving patients' experience by making it easier to access the right care, including a better experience with NHS 111 and better advice at the front door of A&E, so patients are triaged to the right point within the hospital without always needing to go through the emergency department, as is currently the case at Maidstone Hospital, as I saw earlier this month. These are just some of the practical improvements already being delivered in a small number of trusts, which through this plan we will adopt more widely across the NHS, and in doing so deliver the greater resilience ahead of next winter. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased that NHS Providers has welcomed today's plan, and that the Royal College of Emergency Medicine has called it, and I quote, a welcome and significant step on the road to recovery. Taken together with all the other vital work happening across health and care, including our plans to cut elective and primary care waiting times, today's plan will enable better care in the community and at home, and for that care to be more integrated with services in hospitals, and for existing practice to be more widely adopted. I commend this statement to the House.
Shall the Secretary of State Westridge?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and can I thank the Secretary of State for advance sight of his statement. Mr. Speaker, after 13 years of Conservative mismanagement, patients are waiting longer than ever before. Heart attack and stroke victims are waiting more than an hour and a half for an ambulance. 24 hours in A&E isn't just a TV programme, it is the grim reality for far too many patients. 7.2 million people are waiting for NHS treatment. Why? The front door is broken, people are finding it impossible to get a GP appointment, so they end up in A&E. At the same time, the exit door is broken because care in the community is not available. patients are trapped in hospitals, sometimes for months. And in between the two is a workforce that is overstretched, burnt out, ignored by government ministers, and forced out on strike. Does this plan even attempt to get patients a GP appointment sooner? No. Does this plan restore district nursing so patients can be cared for in the comfort of their own homes? No. Does this plan see ministers swallowing their pride and entering negotiations with nurses and paramedics? No. And does this plan expand the number of doctors and nurses needed to treat patients on time again? No. The Health Secretary said a lot of things, Mr. Speaker, but he did not say when patients can expect to see a return to safe waiting times. His colleague, the Minister for Social Care, rather let the cat out of the bag this morning. She was asked, and I quote, "Is there any plan at all for when we will get back to 95% of patients in A&E being seen within 4 hours?" She responded, and I'm not joking, her answer was, and I quote, "I can't tell you that." Ridiculous. How can he claim his plan is ambitious and credible? What kind of emergency care plan doesn't even attempt to return waiting times to safe levels? It's a plan that is setting the NHS up to fail right from the start. A plan for managed decline. These targets are not plucked out of thin air. Patients waiting more than 5 hours in A&E are more likely to lose their lives. So are heart attack and stroke victims waiting more than 18 minutes for an ambulance. Sadly, that is exactly what has happened this winter. It is what happened this summer, and it has been going on since before the pandemic began. The 4-hour A&E waiting time target hasn't been met since 2015. The only time the Conservatives have met the 18-minute target for ambulance response times was during lockdown. What's his ambition now? 30 minutes. 30 minutes waiting for a heart attack and stroke victim to receive an ambulance when every second counts. Isn't it the truth that they missed the targets, so they are moving the goalposts, fiddling the figures rather than fixing the crisis? And he boasts that he's pouring more money in, £14 billion, almost as much as his department has wasted on dodgy, unusable PPE. Yet standards are being watered down. So can he explain why patients are paying more in tax but waiting longer for care? Why is it that under the Conservatives we are always paying more but getting less? So what is their answer? I quote again, "There are so many people in hospital who wouldn't need to be there if we could provide quality care at home. Medical science and technology offers a world of possibility for the NHS to transform patient care. Virtual wards allow people to receive hospital care at home." End quotes. Those aren't the Secretary of State's words, Mr. Speaker. That's my party conference speech. He didn't have a plan for the NHS, so he's nicking Labour's. Now, I'm happy for him to adopt Labour's plans, but here is what he missed. You cannot provide good care in the community, in people's homes, or in the hospital without the staff to care for people. That is the supermassive black hole in his plan published today. People. Virtual wards without any staff isn't hospital at home, it is home alone. So where is his plan to restore care in the community? Labour will double the number of district nurses qualifying every year. So can he hurry up and nick that plan too? And of course, good care in the community is not a substitute for good care in hospital. We need both now. So why, in the middle of the biggest crisis in the history of the NHS, with hospitals so obviously short of staff, is his universities minister writing to medical schools to tell them not to train any more doctors? This is ludicrous. Labour will double the number of medical school places and create 10,000 new nursing and midwifery clinical placements, all paid for by abolishing the non-dom tax status. Now, I know, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister might not like that last bit. The Prime Minister might not like that last bit. They're all complaining opposite, but they didn't complain when they put up income tax, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister doesn't like it, but perhaps this would be a good time for the Conservatives to act tough on tax dodgers. So when is he going to nick that plan? Yeah. And when is he finally going to get his act together and end the strikes in the NHS? Or perhaps I'm speaking to the monkey when the Chancellor is the organ grinder. If that's the case, Mr. Speaker, then when will we get a chance to question the real Health Secretary on the strikes this one is causing in the NHS? Labour will create more front doors in the NHS. We will tackle the crisis in social care. He offers sticking plasters, and by now, Mr. Speaker, it's very clear only Labour can offer patients the fresh start the NHS needs.
Well, Mr. Speaker, he started off by thanking for advance sight of the statement, and then gave a series of remarks that simply ignored what was in the statement. And even his last point just shows how riddled with contradictions the approach from the opposition bench is. He says in interviews that he supports the pay review body process. That is the official position, or at least was. Then he says, no, we should be negotiating individually with the trade unions and disregarding the pay review process. So there's no consistency on that at all. He talks about operational performance. You just had your go. You can hear the answers. He says that it's about operational performance. And I, Mr. Speaker, in my remarks, try to be fair to the fact that actually these are challenges that are shared across the United Kingdom. They're shared globally. He seemed to think that these were just unique to England alone, and yet you only need to look at the fact more than 50,000 people in Wales, notwithstanding it's a smaller population, but more than 50,000 in Wales are waiting over 2 years for their operation, when we cleared that in the summer in England with fewer than 2,000 in that cohort. He talks about workforce, Mr. Speaker, obviously didn't bother to read what we said in the statement. We're on track to deliver our manifesto commitment of over 50,000 nurses. We've got over 30,000 so far. If one just looks compared to last year, Mr. Speaker, 10,500 more nurses in the NHS this year compared to last year. Now, the grown-up position is to recognise, well, the first 5 years we were dealing with the letter that said no money was left. So the first 5 years were indeed, they don't seem to like the response, Mr. Speaker, but the facts speak for themselves. 10,500 more nurses this year than last year. But the grown-up position is to recognise that we have an older population, they have more complex needs, and the consequences of the pandemic are severe. They're severe in England, but they're severe across the United Kingdom, in Wales and Scotland, and indeed in other countries across the globe. He says that the statement didn't cover the plan for GPs. Well, again, I was clear that this was one of 3 plans. We had the elective plan in the summer, which hit its first milestone. We have the second component today in terms of urgent and emergency care, and we will set out in the coming weeks through the work that my colleague on the front bench is doing, our approach in terms of primary care. And that is the approach that we're taking. We're Keys Chantry 30 years. We didn't have the pandemic 13 years ago. So, of course, well, I can only surmise, Mr. Speaker, that he didn't quite get his remarks right, which is why he feels the need to keep chuntering now and have a second, a third and a fourth go. But perhaps next time. On ambition, he ignores the fact that we need to balance being ambitious but being realistic, and these metrics are, in the view of NHS England, the fastest sustained improvement in NHS history. So clearly he is at odds with NHS England in those remarks. On funding, we're putting in an extra £14.1 billion of funding into health and social care over the next 2 years, which reflects the fact that, notwithstanding the many competing pressures that the Chancellor faced at the autumn statement, he prioritised health and social care alongside education as the key areas that were prioritised, notwithstanding the other competing challenges. And on virtual wards, I hadn't quite realised that he was the clinician that had invented virtual wards. I actually think the credit for virtual wards goes to the staff such as those I met at Watford, who are the ones who are driving forward that innovation. And it's slightly strange that he wants to sometimes claim ownership of something that has been clinically led by those working at the front line. We have recognised its value, and that's why both at Northeast this morning or Watford last month or on various other visits, I have been discussing as to how we scale those virtual ward plans.
Chair of the Select Committee, Steve Bryan.
We look forward to going through the plan with the Secretary of State.
OK, well, we were just in the House of Commons there. Steve Bartley, the Health Secretary, was streeting his opposition. We're just going at it hammer and tongs over Rishi Sunak's new NHS recovery plan. Just going to do a quick summary of that for you, ladies and gentlemen. Essentially, what Steve Bartley was saying, that they want to reduce the 12-hour waiting times. They want to publish the 12-hour waiting times for any department that's not, frankly, hitting those. 30-minute response time for Category 2 situations. By the way, Category 2 situation includes strokes and heart attacks, so that is quite a long time. Labour is saying, well, after 13 years of Tory rule, look, you've run the NHS into the ground. What's been going on? And the glaring hole in Tory party's problem at the minute is staff shortages, which they say you're doing nothing to fix. Steve Bartley hit back and he said, well, the way to sort staff shortages, presumably, would be to break the piggy bank open and pay the staff a lot more, which, of course, Labour don't back. So, your bog standard back and forth in the House of Commons there. I did promise you some rather revealing figures, rather startling figures that Mark White, our Home and Security Editor, is going to bring to you. That is on the amount of money that you, the British taxpayer, is paying, essentially for pocket money, for channel migrants. You've got your hotel costs, you've got your sustenance costs, you've got the cost for the border force, the cost for the RNLI, your cost for your social care, your doctors, your GPs, all of this stuff. And now, on top of that, it's been revealed that these people also do get little bank cards with a budget on them, and that budget, well, it's over 100 million. How far over? I'll leave up to your imagination. We're going to have all of that coming your way very, very shortly, but we're going to have the news in a sec. Actually, it's me again. It's 4 o'clock. You're watching and listening to Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up this hour, that big NHS story. That's the largest and fastest ever improvement to emergency waiting times in the history of the NHS. That was the pledge from the Prime Minister today as he announced a £1 billion package to increase hospital beds and ambulance numbers. It's been criticised by Labour. They say there's a supermassive black hole in the plan of staff shortages. Well, I've just spoken to you about that. I'll talk to you again about it shortly. Plus, the announcement was overshadowed earlier by the unceremonious sacking of Nadeem Zahawi for breaching the ministerial code. The PM insists he acted, quote, pretty decisively. Did he? Also this hour, last-ditch talks are in place this afternoon to stop teachers in England and Wales walking out later this week over a dispute in pay. Will the government be able to come to a resolution with the National Education Union? I suspect not, but when you look at the numbers, 4.5 million kids supposedly going to miss out on at least a day of school. Is that fair on them? Anyway, other news, yes, the biggie, £160 million of taxpayers' money, your money, has gone towards giving an allowance to asylum seekers within the last year. The Aspen system, which stands for Asylum Support Enablement Card, is a payment scheme that offers asylum seekers a subsistence allowance. I'm asking, are we just a piggy bank for channel migrants? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Should we be giving pocket money to channel migrants, and would you back a teacher's strike? Now, though, it is your headlines with Polly.
Patrick, thank you, and good afternoon to you. The Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in funding to boost NHS frontline capacity. Steve Bartley says the government will work to bring response times to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to people's homes. Mr Bartley also says they'll publish the number of 12-hour wait lists, but Labour says the plans aren't enough to tackle the problems. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has been defending his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about the investigation into Zahawi's tax affairs and when. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after an ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadeem Zahawi. You know, I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadeem Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
Downing Street has urged unions to step back and prevent a fresh wave of strike action. The statement comes as last-minute talks between teaching unions and the government are being held today in an effort to avoid strike action in England and Wales. Teachers are planning to strike on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and conditions. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Meanwhile, firefighters could vote for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigade's union says its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. Now, in news away from strike action, police are appealing for witnesses as they continue their search for a woman who's gone missing in Lancashire while out walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bulley was last seen on Friday on a footpath in St Michael's on Wyre. She was walking her spaniel before going missing, although her dog has since been found. Police say they're keeping an open mind about what may have happened, but don't believe Miss Bulley was attacked.
Her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, and we appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward.
Boris Johnson has said Vladimir Putin threatened to kill him just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The comment was made during a phone call after Mr Johnson visited Kyiv to show support for Ukraine. The former Prime Minister made the claim in a BBC documentary. The Kremlin has described it as a lie.
He threatened me at one point and said, you know, Boris, I don't want to hurt you, but with a missile it would only take a minute or something like that, you know. Jolly. But I think from the very relaxed tone that he was taking, the sort of air of detachment that he seemed to have, he was just playing along with my attempts to get him to negotiate.
And finally, the personal data of around 10 million JD Sports customers may be at risk after the company was hit by a cyber attack. The sportswear chain says hackers may have accessed private information, including email accounts, phone numbers and the last 4 digits of bank cards. It affects orders placed between November 2018 and October 2020. JD Sports said it was contacting affected customers. That's a news update. Back now to Patrick.
OK, people, well, it's a breaking show, so we might as well deal with that breaking news. It would be rude not to, wouldn't it? It's on the NHS recovery plan. If you were watching in the last hour, you'll have heard them going hammer and tongs at it in the House of Commons in relation to Rishi Sunak's plan to fix our NHS, which, let's be honest, needs rather a lot of fixing. So within the last few minutes, we heard from the Health Secretary as he gave more information on the government's plan to improve waiting times within the NHS. Steve Barclay said all waits of 12 hours or more will be published from April, so that's in A&E departments. Anywhere you have to wait 12 hours or more, that'll be published. And ministers are committed to reducing waiting times. Labour criticised the government's £1 billion plan for the NHS. They said that it had a supermassive black hole when it came to staff shortages. So the Shadow Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, accused the government of setting the NHS up to fail from the start with its new 2-year blueprint for improvement, which is designed to boost capacity on the front line. In a nutshell, they're saying, well, none of this will work, all of this extra budget, all of these extra resources, ambulances, beds, none of it will work because you won't have the staff to be able to handle that. the Tories hit back and said, well, actually, if you want more staff, presumably you're backing having to pay them more. No, you're not, are you? So therefore, we have a bit of back and forth. Earlier, the Prime Minister said a £1 billion cash injection for emergency care would see the largest and fastest ever improvement in waiting times, as well as an increase in the use of virtual wards, which he hopes will be transformational in tackling NHS pressures. It's a massive NHS package, actually, but the Prime Minister was full of fighting talk, so he set out his plans a little earlier on.
More beds, more ambulances, more staff, better social care, and if we can deliver on it, then I think we will see, in fact I know we will see, the largest and fastest ever improvement in emergency waiting times in the NHS's history. That is the ambition of our plan that we've set out today.
OK, are we in world-leading territory again? Maybe we are. But joining me now is Chris Thomas, who's a senior research fellow at the Institute for Public Policy Research and heads their Commission on Health and Prosperity. Great to have you on the show. Thank you very much. We are reacting live now to that breaking news. What do you stand on all of this, then? Will it actually all crumble if we can't entice more staff into the NHS?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Some of the things in today's plan are welcome. I think we do need more beds. The occupancy level of hospitals at the moment is shocking. It's unsafe. We do need more ambulances. But we've seen these big initiatives fail before on the fact that if you can't get workforce to beds, then it's completely pointless. The Nightingales during COVID collapsed for exactly that reason. So if we can't solve the workforce crisis, then not really anything else matters.
Indeed, but is the only way to entice workers to stay and indeed come is to pay them more? Because I keep hearing these strikes are not just about pay, it's about working conditions and patient safety. Is the government trying to call their bluff here and go, well, if we improve working conditions and patient safety, then it just becomes about the money, doesn't it?
The thing is, if they're putting in place schemes which don't work because the workforce isn't there, then they're not doing that kind of patient safety improvement job properly. Pay is a really important aspect to it. I think we need to remember we're talking pay restoration here in terms of what's been cut rather than anything else. That's a huge part of the retention recruitment story. But I think there's other things that are really important as well, just the core working experience of being in the NHS. At the moment, people in the NHS are far more liable to things like mental health problems, in many cases forcing them out of work. We know people report not being able to take water breaks, kind of the core essentials of what it means to go to a job. So pay plus working conditions would be, I think, the thing that would have the biggest impact on the NHS and the standards in it at the moment.
The concern is, as Steve Barclay pointed out to Wes Streeting, neither party at the minute actually backs a pay rise, do they? Apart from the one that the regulator said they should give.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, kind of the party political point to this, but I think the onus on it remains with government, who actually get to go into that room and have negotiations with unions. Okay. I think those negotiations obviously haven't moved forward as quickly as they could have done. There haven't been steps towards a deal, and I think that should be the priority going forward.
One of the things that people keep asking me, and I'm hoping you might be able to shed some light on this, it's fine if not, because it is a bit of a technical point, is people keep asking me, Patrick, did we cut bed numbers in order to account for social distancing during the pandemic, and have we now not replaced those bed numbers?
So I'm not aware of bed numbers going down. There may have been measures taken where space was used differently, or things like virtual wards, which accounted in the numbers, were employed. But the longer term trajectory is we very much cut bed numbers, and the biggest bed cuts happened over the decade of austerity. And the logic there was, let's shift more care into the community, but there was no community capacity that came to replace it. So the situation we have today is that hospitals are meant to be running with only 85% of their beds full. That's the safe level. And the majority of them are running at kind of 95, 98, even 100%, which is just dangerous.
OK, all right. Look, thank you very, very much for joining us on this one. Oh, actually, sorry, just a very quick one, sorry. I do want to talk to you a bit about the virtual wards, because that... Well, I don't know anything about them, really, and not a lot of people do, because they're quite a new thing, aren't they? What is a virtual ward? Will it work? Because my concern is that you end up with the best will in the world of a lot of elderly people trying to get healthcare on an iPad.
Yeah, I mean, they have emerging evidence. I mean, the idea that it would be able to facilitate care at home where it's appropriate is a useful one. If we can get quicker care to people where it would be appropriate, then that's good for their health. But also, you know, we've got to remember the kind of labour market access point here of managing conditions better and getting people into work. But I think you're right. If it's just leaving people on their own to kind of navigate complicated tech without the right staff, without the right support, then there are questions over how effective it will be.
Chris, thank you very much. Chris Thomas there, who's a Senior Research Fellow at the Institute for Public Policy Research and heads their Commission on Health and Prosperity. Reacting to that breaking news, 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, £1 billion put into the NHS. Rishi Sunak is trying to do a very ambitious thing here, really, which is reduce NHS waiting times. Well, frankly, sort out the NHS, isn't it? We get down to brass tacks on that. Now, this is one I've been teasing relentlessly for an hour. We got biffed by Steve Barclay at one point, but now we can actually do it. GB News can reveal that asylum seekers received payments of almost £160 million last year through a government debit card scheme. A Freedom of Information request confirmed by the Home Office showed the huge payout was through the Aspen system, which stands for Asylum Support Enablement Card. It's a payment scheme that offers asylum seekers a subsistence allowance. Stark figures come through as new rules come into force today, which will make it harder for those who arrive here illegally or convicted of serious offences to exploit the legal safeguards that exist to protect victims of modern slavery. Look, lots to talk about here. GBviews at gbnews.uk on this one. Get your views coming in. I am asking you, pretty simply, should we be giving pocket money to channel migrants? GB News' Home and Security Editor Mark White joins me now. Mark, what's the latest?
Well, we've known, of course, that there is a subsistence allowance that is given to those who are asylum seekers, or indeed those who claim to be victims of modern slavery, and they're in a parallel system. What we really haven't known until now is what that quantified is. And now we have that figure. It's from a gentleman called Steve Laws, who's an activist who effectively films these small boat arrivals and also does issues around asylum seekers in an online blog. He put in a Freedom of Information request to the Home Office asking what these Aspen cards, effectively a debit card, where they can put this £40 or so a month for asylum seekers onto, and that gets them whatever they want to buy with that in a shop. What that actual figure from the 1st of January last year to the 31st of January last year amounted to. And the figure that he got back from the Home Office was 159,200, 159 million, I should say, 200,000, which is just short of £160 million. So when it's put in those terms, clearly that is a very significant amount of money, because that comes on top of the more than £6 billion that is already being paid out by the Home Office to house these asylum seekers in hundreds of hotels right across the country. It doesn't, though, begin then to quantify the other issues around having a border force geared up to dealing with channel migrant crossings, of the health and social services that people coming in to the system would require on a daily basis. That is many billions more.
Can I also ask about some of the other things that supposedly people in hotels are getting at the minute? I heard rumblings about bikes or Ubers or things like that. Do we know anything about that at all?
Yeah, we know. I'm not sure about the bikes, but we know that they are given mobile phones if that's requested. There are certainly things that these asylum seekers are given to help them acclimatise to their new life in the UK while they await these asylum decisions. And all of it costs the taxpayer, of course, money as the number of migrants mount up. And it was almost 46,000 last year, another 189 arrived yesterday, taking the figure so far this year to almost 1,200. Now, that's not as much as it was at this period last year, but that is only because the weather's been pretty horrific for the last 2.5 months. There have only been a few days when it's been really flat calm out there and you've had very big numbers coming across. So the government has been saved in a way from the pressure of seeing boats arriving all of the time on a daily basis because of the weather conditions. But as soon as we get into better weather and those numbers mount up, they will mount up significantly. And Home Office officials, we're told, are quietly planning for the potential of double the number that arrived last year to arrive by the end of this year.
I mean, that is quite shocking stuff, that, ladies and gentlemen, that there are preparations supposedly in place for double the number of people who crossed the Channel last year to arrive this year. And Mark, last week, Lee Anderson, backbench Tory MP, brought something into focus that had maybe dropped off the radar a little bit, actually, which was the alleged role of some of the asylum seeker charities on the other side of the Channel there. And am I right in thinking that the current state of play is if you can get yourself to Calais, you will be looked after relatively nicely in Calais, certainly not dissuade you from crossing the Channel. You can get in the Channel where you will pretty much inevitably be picked up, brought to this country, put in a hotel, the expense of the taxpayer, given a mobile phone if you ask for one, and a debit card for a little bit of spending money.
Yeah, I think they looked after relatively nicely as doing some heavy lifting there.
Right.
They are in makeshift camps in scrubland and woodland around the northwest coast of France. But yes, the charities are there to try and feed them and hand out clothing and things like that. What the real concern is of people like Lee Anderson is that these charities are doing much more than that they're giving them the kind of advice that would really help these people when they cross through irregular means, illegal means, across the Channel to this side to get asylum, to make the best possible case. We know the criminal gangs are absolutely instructing them in the best way forward. For instance, if they're from Albania, they're being told, actually, you probably want to claim that you're a victim of trafficking, of modern slavery, because that will stand you probably a better chance of staying in the UK than if you say you're asylum seeking from a country like Albania, which is obviously a peaceful country. So we know that kind of schooling is going on. Those officials that we speak to on a regular basis, those MPs like Lee Anderson, they say it's a whole industry, you know, from the criminal gangs to the charities to those immigration lawyers. We're all helping and schooling these people to stand the best possible chance of ensuring that they stay in the UK.
Sorry, Mark, so I'm going to get shouted at in a second, but I just want clarification on something. As far as we're aware, people are getting £40 a month as a debit card. That totals around 160 million quid spent in the last year for pocket money, essentially, for asylum seekers in hotels. And they can spend that on, as far as we're aware, whatever they want.
And that's exactly what it is, effectively pocket money, because in terms of their food and their clothing, other issues like the mobile phones and things like that, that is catered for. Their accommodation in a hotel is catered for. So if they didn't have any money, they wouldn't starve, they wouldn't be homeless, they wouldn't go without medical care. The £40 a week, which those who argue that this is, you know, a paltry sum, that £40 a week is purely for their pocket money to get whatever they desire in a shop. And that might be cigarettes, might be alcohol, might be sweets, whatever they want to do with that money, they can get off their Aspen cards. But in total, and this is the stark figure really, that amounted to almost £160 million last year.
Mark, thank you very, very much for bringing that to us. That's Mark White there, GB News' home and security editor, just bringing you up to date when it comes to all of that. What do you make of that, ladies and gentlemen? GB Views at gbnews.uk. I imagine the views are going to come flooding in as we wave goodbye to Mark there. The Education Secretary, moving on, Gillian Keegan, has squandered an opportunity to avert strike action. That's according to the leaders of the National Education Union. Let's be honest with you, that could have been written before they even had the talks, but here we go. Today's talks were the final opportunity to avoid the mass walkout scheduled for Wednesday, which is expected to affect more than 23,000 schools and, crucially, around 4.5 million children, really, who are the real victims in all of this. Meanwhile, within the last half an hour, the Fire Brigade Union has announced that firefighters and control room staff have voted to strike over pay. And strikes have been dominating the political agenda today. as MPs have been debating the controversial minimum service levels bill, realistically designed to, well, I suppose, reduce the impact of these strike actions. It's been heavily opposed by the unions. It aims to introduce a law which would force certain public sectors to maintain that basic level of service on days that workers are striking. Let's go live now to GB News' political reporter, Catherine Forster. Catherine, thank you very much. I've been banging on about the teacher stuff. I wanted to bring that into focus a bit earlier on today. So, rather than predictably, Catherine, the government has, quotes, wasted an opportunity to stop the teacher strikes. Is that right?
Yes, bad news for parents who may have been hoping for a last-minute, apologies about the noise, reprieve from having to take time off on Wednesday to look after their children. 4.5 million children said to be affected. No breakthrough in the talks, which has not come as much of a surprise. Kevin Courtney, who is the Joint General Secretary of the NEU, was talking to the press outside after the meeting finished and was really quite downbeat. Let's have a little look at what he had to say.
In almost every one of the 13 years since then. So the gap between prices and pay keeps getting worse and worse for teachers. That's true for other people in the economy, but it keeps getting worse and worse. And there's no sign that the government intends to change that ever. So it feels like people's standard of living just continues to fall. And we have given the Secretary of State some evidence today that that's been actually worse for teachers than other people. And that's impacting on the teacher recruitment and retention. And that is impacting on the standard of education that our young people are getting day by day.
Kevin Courtney was really stressing the crisis that is now in teaching in terms of recruiting and retaining staff. It's very difficult to recruit subject teachers in subjects like physics, for example, and STEM subjects, because frankly, bright graduates can get a lot more money working in a different industry, in a different sector, apologies, so much noise here, than going and becoming a physics teacher. And also, many teachers are leaving. He's saying also that teaching assistants are choosing to go and work in supermarkets instead because they get so little money that it's just not worth their while. I did also ask him if he felt that they had public support, and he said that yes, he thought that public and indeed the parents, by and large, were behind the teachers, and if not behind the strikes, again, for teachers getting more money. And he said that he thought the government should be very worried about the level of support amongst the public for public sector workers.
Yes, OK, all right. Look, thank you very, very much, Catherine, and well done for battling the background noise there. You did it expertly. Catherine Forster there, GB News' political reporter. So that's the news on the teachers' strike. They've said that they are going to strike. Fascinating stuff, though. They're saying, well, hey, a load of teachers, our conditions and our pay is so bad, we're all going and working in supermarkets. Yet to see the data on that. Will be interesting reading as well, wouldn't it? Also, yet to see the data on the level of public support. I can't help but wonder, though, if you were a parent out there and you now had to look after your little sprog on a day that you were planning on sending them to school, whether or not your support for the teacher strike would indeed actually go through. So talks between the boss of the NEU union and the Education Secretary to try to avert the planned strike have failed. They've been described as unproductive. With me live in the studio is former teacher and head of education at the Centre for Policy Studies. It's Mark Lehane. Mark, thank you very much. Great to have you in the studio. Now, it's painted that this is an overwhelming support by teachers themselves for this strike. 90% of teachers at the NEU who took part in this voted in favour of it, but only 53% turned out. It's not exactly a ringing endorsement, is it?
No, and actually, if you do 90% of 53%, and as a former maths teacher, I love doing that kind of stuff, it comes out as only 48% of the NEU members actually voted for strike action. Now, listen, that's within the rules. They've exceeded the thresholds to strike. But one of the concerns I've got, and lots of other people have about these strikes, is that the support for them isn't as deep as the leadership had hoped, and hence they're going to be quite divisive. You're now going to have different people from different unions striking or not striking. Potentially it's going to set people within staff rooms against one another. You might find head teachers trying to open schools and their staff trying to keep the schools closed. And even worse, potentially it pitches schools against the families that they're meant to serve this. And so this Wednesday, lots of families are going to have to take time off work, in the middle of a cost of living crisis to try and look after their kids because they're not at school.
I suppose, really, what this does come down to is whether or not teachers are justified to strike over what they're being paid at the moment. In your view, are they?
Well, it was always nice to be paid more. If you were offered a pay rise, if I was offered a pay rise, we'd absolutely take it, wouldn't we? And there is no doubt that at the top of the teacher pay scale, it hasn't kept up with inflation over the last few years, OK? But at the lower end of the pay scale, teachers have seen their starting salary go up and up and up. And in fact, it will hit £30,000 a year next academic year. So
now, that's interesting. Let's drill down onto that, because when you read a lot of reports onto this, it's talking about a real terms pay cut for teachers of something like 50% more. Sorry, 15%, I should say, I was a 40 years slow, more in the last 10 or 15 years. Now, what you appear to be telling me is that maybe those at the higher end of the pay scale, they've not had the big pay increases, but those at the bottom end, your entry-level teachers, it's not been so bad for them?
That's right. I did a bit of analysis last week, actually, and basically different teachers of different experience have had different amounts of pay rises over time. It has fallen back on where it was in 2010, but teachers did see big pay rises through the 2000s, rightly, I would argue. I was a teacher then, I benefited from that myself. But when you add in the pensions that go along with teachers, the average teacher's salary, classroom teacher's salary, is about £42,000 a year. Add on the pension contributions of another 24%, the average teacher's package is just over £50,000. Now, listen... And
that's your average?
Yeah, that's right, and that's well above what the average worker gets in other sectors. Now, I think that's really important. I think teachers should be well paid.
Yeah.
My argument is we're all facing the cost of living pressures. We are feeling the pinch. People who work in teaching are feeling the pinch, but other people are facing it much worse than that. In particular, lots of those families that teachers are serving through their school. And my worry is that whereas at the moment there is a lot of public support for the profession, when you look at surveys, teachers are in the top 3 or 4 most trusted professions. My worry is if other families start to lose income and are really missing out, and we have these strikes, trust in the profession will decline, and that would be a real shame.
I'm going to have to rush you on this last one, I'm afraid, sorry, but how much has the teaching profession become politicised? Some would argue maybe infiltrated by quite hard left ideology. Could that be contributing towards this or not?
I think it's fair to say some unions have always been a bit more small p political than others. But generally, most teachers are in it for the right reasons, like they always have been. They want to do right by kids. And unfortunately, we're in this situation where the strikes are going on. But that's not the whole profession. That's just some members.
Look, thank you very much. It's been really, really enlightening. That much appreciated. Thank you. I wish you were one of my teachers when I was at school. That'd be great, actually. I probably wouldn't have turned out like this. Mark Lehane there, who is, of course, the Head of Education at the Centre for Policy Studies. Just whizzing you through that breaking news, really, which is that teachers, yes, they're going to strike. It's happening on Wednesday. I mean, it'd be weird if they weren't at this stage, wouldn't it? Everyone else is. Firefighters have just joined the party as well. Anyway, Patrick Christys on GB News. Coming up, King Charles has reportedly asked the Archbishop of Canterbury to offer an olive branch to Prince Harry and invite him to his coronation. Good plan, or would Harry and Meghan's presence overshadow the event? I will be back in just a tick.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you. Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel. Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride. Oh, she's on it today! Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You're with GB News. It's just after 4:30. The headlines this hour. In the last few minutes, it's been announced that firefighters and control room staff have voted for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigades Union said its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. Also in the headlines, Downing Street has urged unions to step back and prevent a fresh wave of nationwide strike action. The plea comes as last-minute talks between teaching unions and the government failed, meaning industrial action by teachers will go ahead on Wednesday in England and Wales. That's over pay and conditions as well. It's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's been defending his handling of the Nadhim Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal exactly what he knew about Nadhim Zahawi's tax affairs. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after an ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadhim Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadhim Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
And lastly, the Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in funding to boost NHS frontline capability. Steve Barclay says the government will work to bring response times to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to take place in people's homes. But Labour says the plans aren't enough to tackle the problems. More detail on that when we come back at 5 o'clock. In the meantime, back to Patrick.
OK, welcome back, everybody. Patrick Christys here on GB News. And the King has reportedly leaned on the Archbishop of Canterbury to ask Prince Harry to attend his coronation. The monarch is said to hope that Justin Welby can come to some sort of agreement with his two sons that would allow the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to attend the coronation in May. The King is said to believe Harry and Meghan's absence will be more of a distraction than if they both attended. And I think that's dividing people, because I suspect a lot of people think it will be more of a distraction if they do turn up than if they just stayed away. Joining me now is former royal butler. It's Grant Harold. Grant, thank you very, very much. Some of the noises are that the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, he's been captured by the spell of Meghan and Harry. Is he really the best person to try to mediate?
Patrick, thanks for having me on. I find this all a bit confusing because the sad part of this is it shows that if the King can't speak to Harry, then is that showing that the communication really has broken down that badly? And going to the Archbishop to kind of obviously help broker a deal, I find it so hard to believe. I mean, bear in mind, being a former member of the royal household, understand how these kind of things work, it just doesn't add up. It wouldn't surprise me if somebody at the Archbishop might have offered assistance. That wouldn't be surprising. But I just find it really hard to believe. And as you said, I think a majority of people will be worried that this could overshadow the coronation.
Yeah, indeed. And look, the mediation, I think, reading between the lines here, is between really Harry and William, kind of mediated, obviously, by the Archbishop of Canterbury. You know the two brothers. You were a former royal butler there. Do you think any amount of mediation can salvage this relationship at this point?
It's really difficult because the one thing about the royal family and even the brothers, it was always about trust. I remember that. Trust was the biggest thing. And the fact that that has broken down between them, I generally don't know. I don't know if you can ever get that kind of trust relationship back. I've always said, I think behind closed doors, it's possible as years gone, decades gone, that things can be fixed. It's not impossible, but it's just, the coronation's only a few months away, and I think that's what I'm really struggling with. If it's broken down this badly, that like obviously needing people to help come to a deal, that's what's worrying. I should also mention, Patrick, I noticed that a poll's been done that said about 70% of the public would like to see Harry actually at the coronation. But as you said, I think a lot of people will be worried because it could overshadow, and I'm sure that is something that the King and William and other members of the royal family will be considering, that it could overshadow the coronation.
Were you as surprised as I was, Grant, to discover that Harry and Meghan apparently want to come to the coronation? I mean, the last I heard, of course, it was, we were a horrible little racist cesspit of a nation and that they wouldn't be seen dead with us. But alas, apparently they seem quite keen on attending.
Well, this is the problem I've got. I mean, who knows? But what I find interesting is if I was in his situation and had done the interviews I'd done and all the rest of it, I wouldn't want to. Wouldn't it be the most awkward thing, Patrick, to turn up at an event where you've done what you've done, you've said what you've said, and then suddenly you're going to be there trying to be all friendly? It just doesn't work. I just don't see how that's possible unless they can fix that relationship. But if you're telling me that between now and May the 6th they can fix the relationship, I think it would be almost a miracle.
Indeed. And I suppose the big one is the Archbishop of Canterbury the right man to do this? I was, again, quite surprised that he was chosen and that he was still talking to Meghan and Harry after they very nearly threw him under the bus by saying that he did a secret wedding for them, which, had it happened, would have been illegal.
I think that the wonderful thing with the royal family, and obviously with the Archbishop of Canterbury, they've got a close relationship. That's a fact, and there always has been that relationship. So I don't find it impossible to believe that this maybe conversation has taken place. But the thing is, again, Patrick, there's so many other people that I know that they've got connections with between the two families that they could easily go to, which I'd have thought would make more sense. But maybe this is somebody who's slightly separate from it all, and maybe he feels that this has to be resolved. And as I said, maybe he's approached the King about this idea. Who knows? This is the thing. But they haven't got long to sort this out.
It's unusual. Grant, just one more quick one. It's slightly unusual because this is unquestionably the royal family offering an olive branch to Harry and Meghan. Surely this is, some would argue, a big break in protocol. This is really a gift from King Charles.
I've noticed there've been a few occasions now the King's offered the olive branch, and the reality is this could be the last olive branch they're offered. If they get this wrong, then this could be the end of that relationship, because there's only so many times you can offer an olive branch, and in the King's position, he's already done it a few times. I think this will be the last time that olive branch will be offered, and after that, that will be, I don't see it happening again. I don't see them offering anything going forward.
So in your opinion, Grant, you think that this mediation from the Archbishop of Canterbury, if this doesn't go well and if Harry doesn't take it, that's it for Harry's relationship with the royal family?
I think it could possibly, for the time being, that could be where they go their separate ways. As I said, I always think things are possibly to heal, but at this moment in time, yeah, I think it's possible that could be it.
Grant, always a pleasure. And can I just say as well, I'm in awe of wherever you always do your interviews with me from. It looks like an absolutely splendid place. Where is it? Do you live
It's not Buckingham Palace. Yes, it's not Buckingham Palace. It's my home.
This is your home. I tell you what, I mean, well, gosh, there's not an invite, but if there ever is one, I'll be round there in a shot. Grant, thank you very much. Grant Harold, former royal butler from what looks like a palace of his own, I must say. There we go. Right, now, I wanted to delve into the inbox, gbviews at gbnews.uk. 3 biggies that you've gone off in today. We've got the healthcare plan that Rishi Sunak has launched. Also, the fact that we're spending, it's £40 a week of your money, which equates to around £160 million a year on pocket money for channel migrants. And yes, just now, I'm looking at the inbox in front of me now, a lot of you getting very, very miffed about the idea that Harry might even come to the coronation. But let's delve into that inbox now. I'm going to start with the government's pledge of thousands of extra hospital beds, hundreds more ambulances in a bid to tackle the long emergency care delays Ray has been on. Ray says, our incompetent government is not able to pay nurses a living wage, but they can introduce billions of pounds in more funding to help tackle emergency care and waiting times. What do they not get? The nurses are on the front line. Without them, they are nothing. I understand your point completely, Ray. I would just politely push back and say, what the government would argue, I imagine, is, well, we can either pay the nurses and other staff what they want, or we can increase the number of resources. again, it doesn't take a genius to work out that you kind of almost can't do one without the other, actually, because you can increase the resources, but if you haven't got the staff because they're leaving because you're not paying them enough, then it doesn't work anyway. It's a hot mess. Alan from Scotland says, I believe the sole issue with A&E is the lack of care homes needed. The government needs to start building more all over the UK. As soon as this happens, there won't be as many ambulance waiting in line at A&E. Yeah, I mean, the fact is we've got an elderly population, an ageing population, I should say, and we do not live in a society where it's traditional, really, to have your elderly relatives living with you in their dotage. And I can understand that. A lot of people don't want great-grandma in your spare room, and I can get that because people have got lives to live. But actually, in some cultures, they do that. Maybe that takes the burden off the NHS. Maybe you're onto something, building more care homes. Again, who pays for that, though? Mel says the plan announced today regarding virtual wards is a frightening prospect. What exactly is a virtual high-tech bed? We can't even get a remote appointment with a GP. So what are the chances of getting a remote appointment at a hospital? Yeah, I completely understand what you're saying there. I can see problems left, right and centre with virtual at-home wards. Lots of reaction to the asylum seeker story that Mark White brought us. £40 a week in pocket money. As Mark White brought to you there, he's saying, as an asylum seeker here, you get bed and board, obviously, OK? You also do get clothing, etc., and you get healthcare. So the £40 a week on a debit card that you and I are paying for is just straight pocket money to spend, as we understand it, on whatever you want. My blood is boiling, says Janet. There are many good people out there who work very hard for their pay and don't have £40 a week disposable income. That's a good point. I've also had Annabelle on. Annabelle says, do the homeless veterans here get £40 a week? We know the answer. That's no, OK? So, yes, people up in arms about the revelation that £160 million a year of taxpayers' money is spent just on pocket money for Channel migrants. By the way, that could well double next year because we're expecting, shock horror, double the amount of Channel migrants. You're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. After the break, fears grow for a mother of two who went missing on her morning dog walk. We will have the latest from our reporter in Lancashire. Yes, really morbidly fascinating case. I'll bring you the latest on that in just a moment.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prisons?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
Yeah, welcome back, everybody. Now, police in Lancashire have said that they are extremely concerned of the safety of Nicola Bulley, who has been missing now for 3 days. The 45-year-old mother of two was last seen at around 9 a.m. on the morning of the 27th of January while walking her dog on a footpath next to the River Wyre. Nicola's boyfriend has said that she has two little girls that need their mummy home. It's a really interesting case, this, for all the wrong reasons, of course. We go live now to Lancashire, where GB News reporter Will Hollis is. Will, what is the latest?
Yes, well, this has been a bit of an ongoing case for Lancashire Police, and it's one that they can't quite get resolved at the moment. It's not just Lancashire Police who's looking for Nicola Bulley, a 45-year-old woman from the local area near to St Michael's along the River Wyre. It's also including various different teams of divers, fire and rescue officers, and they're really quite concerned because Nicola hasn't been seen since 9:15 a.m. on Friday morning, so that's more than 3 days ago. And it's something that is really worrying police and, of course, the people that are around her. Where I am right now is just by the River Wyre, and there's a bench where soon after she went missing, her mobile phone was found. She was on a walk with her spaniel dog. The spaniel dog was also found shortly afterwards, but there's still no idea where Nicola might be. We've been speaking and hearing from Lancashire Police, and they can give a little bit more as to what's been going on in this investigation.
So I'm here today to appeal for witnesses in the case of Nicola Bulley. This is a 45-year-old lady from the local area who sadly went missing last Friday morning at about 9:15 a.m. She was last seen walking her small brown dog on the towpath of the River Wyre. The dog was found about an hour later, as was her mobile phone. So her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, including a number of specialist officers from our Northwest Underwater Regional Search Unit and specialist investigators who are supporting the family, as well as a lot of partners like Bowland Mountain Rescue, Lancashire Fire and Rescue and others, and the Coast Guard. We thank them very much, as well as local people who've turned out in force, who are obviously equally concerned for Nicola. And we appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward. They can ring 101, or if they have a sighting of Nicola, 999.
This does appear to be quite a tight-knit community. There's lots of dog walkers that have been walking along the River Wyre where I'm standing right now, and it seems that quite a few of them knew Nicola and certainly recognised her. There's also pictures of Nicola on the trees and on the posts and the gates around here, because this is really quite a big concern for the local people as well as for Lancashire Police. Because it is quite a big concern for local people, Lancashire Police say that if you are interested in helping, if you are trying to do something to, I suppose, make sense of it in your own way, really not to put yourself in danger, because of course this does really focus around this part of the River Wyre here near St Michael's, and while there have been diving teams that have been going along and clearly examining parts of the river, they don't want anybody to put themselves into risk. But of course they do say if you do have information, if it's something small, maybe 111 would be the way to go. But if there is some hard evidence, and there is that, of course, that emergency line, you can get in touch with the police on 999 if you think you have seen Nicola.
Will, thank you very much. Will Hollis there reporting to us from Lancashire. I'm just going to echo the words of Nicola's boyfriend here, which is the quote, which is two little girls that need their mummy home. And of course, if anyone does have any information in relation to the disappearance of Nicola Bulley, please do contact 111 or indeed 999. Right, now, moving on from that, I'm going to go back into the inbox. We are hoping to, very shortly anyway, have a little bit of a chat about a story that I saw yesterday. And I'm sure a lot of you will have seen it as well. London School of Economics, they have decided to cancel yes, they've cancelled Christmas in a way. They've cancelled Christmas term, Michaelmas, Lent, because obviously in a drive to relentlessly and indeed needlessly be seen as inclusive to everybody from all over the world, we can't possibly offend people with the word Christmas or indeed Michaelmas or Lent. I'm wondering whether or not this is just yet another example, frankly, of, I suppose you could argue, Christian tradition being eviscerated in this country, just at the altar of inclusivity and maybe to protect the sensitivities of others. Hopefully we're going to get a guest on that shortly, but in the meantime, it just gives me another excuse, doesn't it, to talk to you, wonderful people. GBviews at gbnews.uk, and lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the fact that asylum seekers are receiving almost £160 million last year to a government debit card system. So, get this, OK? You find your way to Calais, where you are relatively looked after anyway by groups like Care for Calais, who did not care to comment, actually, when we were trying to get them on the show the other day. And then you make your way across the channel, you picked up the RNLI, Border Force, whatever, taxpayers' money yet again, then you're sent for processing at a Manston Processing Centre or other ones like it. Then you find yourself in a 4-star hotel in some cases. And then on top of that, you get your bed and board, of course. And then you get clothing. All right, fine, you can go and see a doctor. You can see a GP. You might find yourself, even in some cases, males, men, fully grown men, find yourself getting an education in our school system. And then on top of that as well, someone comes up and goes, do you want a mobile phone? They say, yes, I'd love to have a mobile phone. Thank you very much. I need it, of course, to call my family back in Albania or wherever they're from. And then you get a mobile phone. And then, shock horror, you get given a debit card as well. Here's £40 a week for you to spend on whatever you want. Go down the shops, hit the shops, don't spend it all at once, darling. Lyndon says, it's so frustrating that the bottomless pit of money this country has is being used to support and encourage migrants to come across the channel illegally, especially when some of our own ex-service personnel are living rough on the street. And it just hammers it home again, doesn't it? You know, we have got a cost of living crisis at the minute. We've always had a veteran homelessness problem, and that is, by the way, through a variety of different issues, and I'm sure we can all imagine them. Catastrophic levels of mental health issues within our armed forces, from the horrors of war that they've seen, and it's not always as straightforward as to why they end up on the streets. But the fact is, we have, roughly speaking, around 7,000 homeless military veterans. That's a conservative estimate. And they're not getting 40 quid a week from the government, are they? The government isn't rounding them up and going, here you go, here's a debit card so you can spend the money on whatever you like. Robert says the majority of these people are not fleeing a war-torn country. They are coming from France. They should be applying for asylum in the first country they enter. If not, they should lose the right to apply. I voted for Brexit to stop this influx of illegal migrants, but all that has happened is that it's gotten worse. That's your view. It's echoed, by the way. I could go on. I've got emails in front of me here, but I've only got a second or two. I just want to say, yes, we are clearly now a soft touch, aren't we? A 4-star hotel, clothing, bed, board, healthcare, education, public services coming out your backside, plus 40 quid a week. Expenses. We had 46,000 people come across the channel last year. That number predicted to double in the year ahead. How much more can we afford?
Hi there, it's Aidan McGibbon here from the Met Office. It's turned out to be a dry afternoon for many, and it will stay dry at first this afternoon and into the evening with clear spells as the sun goes down in the south, but further wet weather is on the way in the far north. This area of low pressure heading towards Iceland will dangle its weather fronts in from the northwest, and they will thicken up the cloud across western Scotland, parts of Northern Ireland, bringing some light rain during the evening, but heavier rain later in the evening, and by midnight that's crossing Northern Ireland, much of Scotland, arriving into Northern England and North Wales. Ahead of that, clear spells at first, perhaps a touch of frost in some sheltered spots in the south, otherwise 3 to 5 Celsius first thing Tuesday. 4 to 5 Celsius to the north of the front, but blustery showers here as the wind picks up and brings a number of outbreaks of rain into Scotland, Northern Ireland, as well as Northern England during Tuesday. Meanwhile, in the south, the area of cloud and outbreaks of rain clear the south coast as a weakening feature, and the sun returns by the afternoon across much of England and Wales. 12 Celsius in the south, feeling pleasant enough, but feeling cold with that strengthening wind for Scotland, Northern Ireland and Northern England, and snow falling over the Scotland hills and mountains above 400 metres. The wind strengthens further during Tuesday night, with gales developing across exposed coasts of northern Scotland, 60 to 70 mile/hour wind gusts possible, perhaps even 80 mile/hour for a time. That could cause disruption. Further south, it's breezy, but it's mostly clear, with temperatures dipping to 6 to 7 Celsius by the start of Wednesday. And Wednesday is going to be a blustery day in the north, with further showers or longer spells of rain for Northern Ireland, Northern England and southern Scotland. The rest of Scotland sees the winds die away during Wednesday, and the showers will ease as well to sunny spells. But all areas look cloudier on Thursday and Friday, although also milder.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes.
Oh,
already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous.
Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even some ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, wonderful people. It's just gone 5 p.m. It's a bumper news day, and you are with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News. Let's get stuck in. Talks fail to avert a teachers' strike this coming Wednesday. It will be another whopping big day for strikes that Wednesday, because teachers, train drivers, university lecturers, security guards, well, they will all join 100,000 civil servants on a walkout that's expected to be the largest industrial action in over a decade. But today, I'm focusing more on the teachers, because they're going on strike. They want, apparently, an above-inflation pay rise. Supposedly, around 4.5 million children will miss out on school. But when you really drill down on the numbers, it's emerged that actually, only around 47% of teachers from one union voted to strike. Go figure. This is another biggie for you. Are we just a piggy bank for channel migrants? GB News can reveal within the last year, asylum seekers have received payments of £160 million through government cards. The Aspen system, which stands for Asylum Support Enablement Card, is a payment scheme that offers asylum seekers a subsistence allowance. Our Home and Security Editor Mark White will bring you the very latest on that. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. 2 big topics for you to get cracking with this Monday evening. Do you back a teacher's strike? The numbers, I think, on that will shock you when I reveal them to you later on. And should we be giving channel migrants pocket money? gbviews@gbnews.uk. Look forward to hearing from you. I'll be back in the headlines.
Patrick, thank you. Good evening to you. The news at just after 5 o'clock on GB News. Firefighters and control room staff have, within the last hour, voted for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigade's union says its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. And teachers are planning to go on strike in England and Wales after last-minute talks between unions and the government failed for them as well. The National Education Union says there's no offer from Gillian Keegan on trying to bridge the gap. Teachers are planning to strike on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and conditions, and it's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. Union leaders say the Education Secretary has squandered an opportunity to avoid strike action.
Gap between prices and pay keeps getting worse and worse for teachers. That's true for other people in the economy, but it keeps getting worse and worse, and there's no sign that the government intends to change that ever. So it feels like people's standard of living just continues to fall. And we have given the Secretary of State some evidence today that that's been actually worse for teachers than other people, and that's impacting on the teacher recruitment and retention, and that is impacting on the standard of education that our young people are getting day by day.
Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in funding to boost NHS frontline capability. Steve Barclay says the government will work to bring response times back to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to take place in people's homes. Mr Barclay also says the government will publish the number of 12-hour wait lists. But Labour says the plans aren't enough to tackle the problems. Well, the Prime Minister has been busy defending his handling of the Nadhim Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under real pressure to reveal what he knew about Zahawi's tax affairs. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after the ethics inquiry found he'd committed a serious breach of the ministerial code.
All these questions started coming to light about Nadhim Zahawi. I asked the independent advisor to get to the bottom of it and to provide me with the facts. I was able to make a very quick decision that it was no longer appropriate for Nadhim Zahawi to continue in government, and that's why he's no longer there. That's what I've done. It relates to things that happened well before I was Prime Minister, so unfortunately I can't change what happened in the past.
Police are appealing for witnesses as they continue their search for a woman who's gone missing in Lancashire while she was out walking her dog. 45-year-old Nicola Bulley was last seen on Friday on a footpath in St Michael's-on-Wyre. She was walking her spaniel before she went missing, although her dog has since been found. Police say they're keeping an open mind about what happened, but they don't believe Miss Bulley was attacked.
Her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, and we appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward.
Boris Johnson says Vladimir Putin threatened him just weeks before Russia's invasion of Ukraine. The comment was made during a phone call after Mr Johnson visited Kyiv in Ukraine to show support for the country. The former Prime Minister made the claim in a BBC documentary. The Kremlin has described it as a lie. And lastly, the personal data of around 10 million JD Sports customers may be at risk after the company was hit by a cyber attack. The sportwear chain says hackers may also have accessed private information, including email accounts, phone numbers and the last 4 digits of bank cards. It affects orders placed with JD between November 2018 and October 2020. JD Sports says it was contacting any customers who may have been affected. That's your latest news. More news as it happens. Now back to Patrick.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I thought we'd moved away from strikes, but alas, no, we haven't, because there's more of them. It feels like we're getting dangerously close to general strike territory, as another wave of industrial action is looming large, and more workers from a range of sectors are walking out this Wednesday. Talks between, rather predictably, the education union leaders and the Secretary of State for Education took place today. Anyone guess what happened? Yeah, they broke down. But the NEU have subsequently said that Gillian Keegan has squandered the opportunity to avert walkouts, which are expected to affect 23,000 schools. Another way of putting that is roughly 4.5 million children. Also this afternoon, the Fire Brigades Union has announced that their members have voted overwhelmingly in favour of strike action. So today alone, we've got teachers and the Fire Brigade. Not a great start to the week, is it? It all comes as the government's minimum service levels bill is going through its final stages in Parliament, which has been vehemently opposed by the union. So that's essentially a bill to, well, do what it says in the tin, really. Make sure that even during hardcore strike action, there is a minimum service there, so things keep on running in the variety of vital public service sectors. Lots to get stuck into, I'm sure we can all agree. Joining me now to discuss the ethics of this minimum service levels bill is political commentator, it's David Oldroyd-Bolt, and trade unionist Jerry Hicks. Both of you, thank you very, very much. Now, Jerry, in light of the fact that 4.5 million kids might be off school and the Fire Brigade might decide to take a few days off work as well, are you against a minimum service level?
I am against a minimum service level. It's an attack on workers' rights. It's an attack on the right to strike. It's also very much a political diversionary tactic. The Tories are tanking in the polls. They're mired in sleaze, corruption, bullying, ineptitude, incompetence. So it's throwing red meat at an ever-decreasing right-wing rump of ex-UKIP, now Tory supporters. Fiddling whilst Rome burn is a phrase. This lot's been on the fiddle whilst the UK has crashed and burned. Workers are underpaid, undervalued, taxed more, getting less, suffering a cost of living crisis, rocketing food bills, sky-high energy bills, a broken NHS. If the Tories were a car, they'd be a clapped-out old banger that someone's torched on their local dump.
OK. All right, that's strong stuff. David Oldroyd-Bolt, political commentator, your views?
It's strong stuff, and it's a good line about fiddling while Rome burns, but that's exactly what I suggest the union leaders are doing. Who is supposed to pay for higher and higher and higher wages for union members at a time when there is, as you say, a cost of living crisis, at a time when the people who pay their bills, the taxpayers, are being taxed more than they have been since the Second World War? Where is this money coming from? Are we supposed to borrow it and put the nation further into debt? Are we supposed to, therefore, indebt our children and grandchildren so that public sector workers, who already have extremely generous pensions packages, who already have on average higher wages than private sector workers, can be given a boost over the people who pay their wages? Now, I would say that there is, in the phrase public servant, an onus on those people who are treated well by the state in times of great plenty to step back a bit and look at how generous the state has been to them, and to say, actually, at this time when the people who pay our bills, that is to say, the people in the private sector of this country, are suffering, we need not to be so greedy and to accept that for a year or two we can't have more money.
Jerry, I'll just put this to you in light of something that emerged today in terms of the education union strike. If people are looking at their kids being off school, 4.5 million of them supposedly, as a result of teachers wanting better pay, and then they look at 90% but only of 53% turnout, so that equates to 48% of teachers from one union voting to go on strike. It's not even a majority, let alone an overwhelming majority. For an average teacher's salary of what is already £42,000, which is above what many people in the private sector get, people might look at it and think, hang on, this is a bit rum.
Well, they might do if they listened to those figures. My daughter-in-law was a teacher, and on nowhere near that sum of money that you said. She left, just as in the NHS, they're leaving in their droves, these public sector workers, these servants that your colleague suggested. They're leaving in their droves because they are underpaid and undervalued. Do you know, if we had a winter like we used to have, the schools would be closed for weeks. What are we going to do? Ban snow? They can't afford things. Workers are using food banks. A local Tory will go to their food bank and see it as some sort of success. It's horrendous.
David, I'll let you come back.
By the way, we can afford this because I'd rather have 3 or 4 teachers than a head teacher in an academy who earns way more than that.
OK, right. Well, there's a lot to unpack there. David, I'll let you come back to it. I know you were listening intently. David Oldroyd-Bolt, political commentator.
Well, food banks are a good thing because it means that your people in your community are stepping in to help the less well-off, and you're not putting yet more burden onto the taxpayer who can't afford it. Again, I ask the question, who is supposed to be paying for these things? There is no magic money machine. There is no cash machine that the nation can turn to and just press bang and get some more money out to pay for it. Public sector workers cannot pay more tax. Therefore, there is no more money to pay for public service workers. We are all in this together, whether the unions like it or not, and everybody is under pressure. Therefore, everybody has to experience pay restraint.
David, sorry, Jerry, should I have to pay?
We're not all in this together. The energy companies are making colossal profits. There's more billionaires now than ever before in the UK.
But, Jerry, that's more tax.
Bankers' bonuses have been allowed to let rip again. Shareholders are raking it in. We're not all in this together. The gap between rich and poor in the 13 years of the Tory government has never been so big.
Jerry, do you just want...
the wealthy.
OK. Yeah, well,
the wealthy are paying more now than they ever have done as a percentage of income tax. The top 1% in this country pay nearly 30% of the entire tax bill. The top 10% pay nearly 70%. If you increase taxes on those people, the money overall will drop. I know you don't like it, because what you'd like to do is tax wealth at 100% above some arbitrary figure that you've decided is rich, but it doesn't work. All that it means is that the tax burden is spread even more onto those who can afford it even less. It's an absolutely utopian idea.
Right. Jerry, why shouldn't... Jerry, right, stop. Why shouldn't there be a minimum number of teachers in schools, or a minimum number of people manning fire engines, or a minimum number of people driving ambulances? Because it's the public who are going to suffer. Why should children have to suffer because teachers on 42 grand a year want a pay rise above inflation?
Well, firefighters, ambulance workers, paramedics, nurses, there's already a minimum standard. It's negotiated locally, and we've seen it on those picket lines. You will see the ambulance with the lights flashing and the sirens going off. But when it comes to schools, by the way, the Tories introduced this with their rhetoric to begin with as minimum safety standards. I have never felt my life at risk when the local school was closed. And I say again, if it's
you haven't got 4 kids running around your house.
Closed for weeks. What this is it's to make sure that the strikes, as far as the Tories are concerned, are as weak as they possibly can be. But here's the thing about you mentioned the ballots and the percentages. No MP is elected with the sorts of majorities that have been voted in these ballots.
But Jerry, I've got to put you up on that because I knew you were going to say this. But Jerry, I do understand what you're saying, which is people go, well, the turnout isn't this high at a general election, and then if you really break it down, any MPs, let's all know. But it's not a single issue election, is it? And I've got to be honest with you, Jerry, if someone was balloting me, or most of us, let's be honest, on a singular issue, which is, do you want more money, and were you willing to strike? We'd all turn up for it, wouldn't we? Which makes it pretty shocking for me that only 53% of teachers in this union bothered to turn up. They were asked if they wanted more money, and 47% of them basically said no.
Well, funnily enough, a lot of the strike ballots were conducted during the postal strike, and a lot of the ballot papers...
Whose fault's that?
A lot of the ballot papers...
Jerry, now you know how we all feel, Jerry, all right? The postal strike kicked off, and this is what happened. I do take your point, Jerry. I do take your point. I'm just going to get...
It's important to compare MPs who will make legislation with workers who actually make things, make the country work. And there is a huge difference between an MP getting elected, always on the minority of electorates, and a strike ballot.
Jerry, thank you very, very much. Look, David, I'm sorry, we haven't got time to go back to you now, but I think we had a good hearing there. David Oldroyd-Bolt and trade unionist Jerry AX going hammer and tongs, or is it hammer and sickle?
Thanks,
When it comes to the strike action. Good stuff. Oh, what a way to kickstart the fire. Right, so talks with the Education Secretary was unproductive. That's according to the NEU. But union leaders are hopeful there may still be a chance of a deal at some point in February ahead of further scheduled strike dates. With me now is maths teacher and author. It's the wonderfully named Bobby Siegel. Bobby, how are you?
Hi, Patrick. Good, thank you.
OK, right, so we spoke a little bit about it then. Let's delve in now to these teachers' strikes. 42 grand a year on average, I'm being told, with the pensions as well would take it up to an average of 50k. That's higher than a lot of people in the private sector who can't go on strike. Why should teachers be special?
OK, I think the teaching profession is not asking to be special. It's asking to be treated fairly for the level of skill and qualification they bring. And I always think with these sort of things, first you look at what the external factors are, and then you sort of see what the impact is. So what I'll say from the teaching profession, since 2010, the NEU, one of the teaching bodies, has said that there's a 23% cut in real terms. OK, the Institute of Fiscal Studies, they got a different figure, 11% cut in terms of real terms, but there's still
Bobby, I've got to pick you up on that.
In real terms
Bobby,
over the
I've
last
got to
12 years.
All right, I've got to pick you up on that because apparently that figure really relates to people at the higher end of the teacher's pay scale and not those at the lower end. So the entry-level salary has gone up, hasn't it? It's those people that apparently everyone on the left seems to hate. The people making loads of money at the top end of the teacher's pay scale, they're the ones who've had the real-term pay cut, not the ones who are looking to get into teaching.
But what I would say is that if you look at teaching, is it an attractive profession for people to join? So the stats are that since the pandemic, there's an increase of 2/3 in vacancies. So the reality is, ultimately, it's a labour market, there's supply and demand. Young people, graduates, people that are changing careers are choosing not to join the teaching profession. And again, I speak, Patrick, as a maths teacher. 1 in 8 maths lessons in the country, which is a tricky subject to teach, they're taught by non-specialists. So we're seeing a compromise in the quality of education. If you look at the direction of travel, the next 2, 3, 5, 7, 10 years, we're going to struggle as a profession to attract good people because if you're a qualified young graduate and you think, OK, what can I do? Go to the private sector, become an engineer, work in finance, work in banking, work in teaching. People enter teaching because they want to give back. They want to share their love and learning and knowledge. But if teaching doesn't offer a fair set of pay, then people will vote with their feet and not join the profession.
I get that, but you mentioned the words fair percent there. And when I look at the fact that only 48% of one teachers' union decided that they wanted to go on strike, and I look at the fact that 4.5 million kids will not get an education that particular day and other days as a result, I would argue that's not fair.
Yeah, again, I don't know the specifics about how they came to the vote, but I do know that in any sort of Western democracy, people, employees, labour, they have the right to withdraw their labour from the market if they get an appropriate number of votes. And again, I'm not sure what the levels required, but I'm sure
they did cross the threshold. They did, yeah. They did. The rules are there, and you can strike with not a majority. So, yes, there you go. Look, Bobby, thank you very, very much. It's great to have you on the show. I do appreciate it. Sorry it was short and sweet, but as ever, I'm massively overrun of everything. Bobby Siegel there, who is a maths teacher and author and owner of a fantastic name as well, it must be said. Now, the Prime Minister and his Health Secretary have spent today outlining their plans to get the NHS back on its feet. Speaking in the House of Commons, Steve Barclay said all waits of 12 hours or more, that's in A&E, will be published from April, and that ministers are committed to reducing waiting times. But Labour has criticised the government's £1 billion plan for NHS emergency care, saying that it can't compensate for staff shortages. Joining me now is the former Health Secretary and former chair of the NHS Confederation. It's Stephen Dorrell. Stephen, thank you very much. We are just caught in a never-ending cycle of back and forth here, are we? Because the Conservatives have gone, OK, you're striking over pay and conditions. We'll try and sort out your conditions, but we can't sort out your pay. Labour is saying, well, why don't you sort out the pay? And then the Tories say, well, you don't want to sort out the pay either. And here we are, day in, day out, having the same chat.
Well, indeed, you and I have had this conversation several times over the last few weeks, Patrick. I regret the fact, and I believe the vast majority of NHS staff who are involved in these disputes also regret the fact that this issue wasn't addressed by Steve Barclay and Rishi Sunak immediately on Sunak's appointment as Prime Minister. We've known for months that there was going to be intense pressure this winter, and to have faced those pressures against the background of a pay dispute was frankly a political choice by the government, and it was a mistaken political choice. Now what they're seeking to do is to rescue the situation by promising to buy more ambulances and to open more beds ahead of next winter. But of course, in order to do that, in order to make use of the ambulances and in order to staff the beds, they've got to address the staffing issues that are at the heart of the problem in the first place.
Yes, indeed. You alluded to those figures there. I'll just reiterate those for our viewers and listeners who might be just joining us, which is that funding has been announced for 5,000 new hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, part of a £1 billion fund, essentially, to try to sort out the NHS. Rishi Sunak also wants more call handlers on 111, so it's the non-emergency line, and a few other bits and bobs, as well as virtual wards, for example. Does he not deserve some credit for actually coming up with this plan and presenting it to us? I'm sorry, but I very rarely hear a coherent plan from the opposition benches.
Well, I agree with the principle of virtual wards. The NHS has been talking about virtual wards. What in my day, and my day is now quite a long time ago, used to be called hospitals without walls. The important thing about virtual wards is that hospitals shouldn't just be the place where you go when other bits of the system are closed. We need social care, we need proper investment in primary care in order that people don't end up in hospital unnecessarily. I wholeheartedly agree with that. But I sometimes wonder, whether the Prime Minister reads the papers. Because buying more ambulances, what we've seen over the last few months is ambulances queuing up outside A&E departments because the A&E departments weren't properly staffed and weren't able to take the patients out of the ambulances. So what are we going to have next summer? Longer ambulance queues?
Well, quite possibly, yes. Now, hear me out on this one. I'm just wondering whether or not the NHS is engaging in some massive national act of self-sabotage, in the sense that I completely understand people want more pay and they want to voice their concerns with their working conditions, all of that stuff. However, they are now making the NHS sound like probably the most undesirable place in the UK to work. And so why on earth would anyone who's been watching the news in the last 6 months want to go into our NHS? Therefore, we still end up, no matter what you do, really, with a staffing shortage.
Well, it's a bit more complex than that, Patrick. First of all, the first point to make is that there's a shortage, not just in this country, but all around the world for qualified doctors and nurses.
Why
We're
is that?
competing in a global marketplace. The answer, of course, is that there hasn't been sufficient training capacity, either in this country or in other countries. That's part of it. And importantly, I also think that our health system and actually other health systems don't make the investments necessary to use the clinical skills we train as effectively as possible. Example, we train pharmacists. We give them a level of skill in the dispensing and the use of medicines to deal with patients' concerns. And then we don't trust them to use those skills in the pharmacy. We insist that people have to go and see a GP. That, of course, in some ways, is that right? But we should use pharmacists and other healthcare professionals more cleverly than we do.
Yes, although, ironically, if you made them do more work, they'd probably want a whopping great big pay rise as well. Stephen, thank you very much. Great stuff. I always enjoy our chat. Stephen Durrell there, former Health Secretary and former chair of the NHS Confederation. Fascinating, isn't it, that all over the world, you don't hear this very often, all over the world they're struggling to recruit enough doctors and nurses. Dare I say, it's almost like it's a much less attractive proposition to be a doctor or a nurse than it once was. Why? Because actually, at times, it's a grim job, it's hard, and you can just be a TikTok influencer instead. Patrick Christys on GB News. After the break, fears are growing for a 45-year-old mother of two who sadly went missing on her morning dog walk. I'll have the latest from Lancashire on that one. I'm also going to be bringing you the latest as well on that startling figure, £160 million a year of taxpayers' money spent on pocket money for Channel migrants. Back in a tick.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely
Right.
stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship,
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
and no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes back on the TV
Surprised
with me this
you
morning.
even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
This year on GB News, we've got brand new members in the family.
Join us. Across the entire United Kingdom, we cover the issues that matter to you. GB News will always stay honest, balanced and fair. We want to hear whatever is on your mind.
And we don't talk down to you.
The establishment had their chance.
Now we're here to represent you.
Britain's watching.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
and right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236. And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Loads more to come here for you, ladies and gentlemen. But this is a big story for us. Police in Lancashire have said that they are extremely concerned over the safety of a lady called Nicola Bulley, who's been missing for 3 days. A 45-year-old mother of 2 was last seen at around 9 a.m. on the morning of the 27th of January, whilst walking her dog on a footpath next to the River Wyre. Nicola Bulley's boyfriend has said that she has 2 little girls that need their mummy home. We're going live now to Lancashire, where GB News reporter Will Hollis is. And Will, yes, so just run us through what we know about this incident so far.
Good evening, Patrick. Well, those of you watching on TV will see that it is, of course, now dark here in Lancashire, and of course that's another night where police will be finding it much harder to continue this investigation into the disappearance of Nicola Bulley. This is now the 4th night since Nicola went missing. She went missing on Friday morning at around 9:15. She was walking her dog, a spaniel, and when police were alerted to the fact that she had disappeared, her spaniel was soon found afterwards, as well as her mobile phone on a bench just behind me here along the River Wyre. But of course Nicola wasn't found. Now this is something that's really concerning the local police, and as well as the local police using drones and search dogs. They've had underwater divers, mountain rescue teams here along this part of the River Wyre in St Michael's searching for Nicola, but police do say that they are keeping an open mind and they are They do have a number of lines of inquiry to try and figure out what has happened to her or where she might be right now. Nicola is described as white, 5 foot 3 inches with light brown hair. She's also described as having an Essex accent. She was last seen wearing a long black gilet and black jeans. Chief Superintendent Sally Riley from Lancashire Police can tell you a little bit more about what's been happening here.
So I'm here today to appeal for witnesses in the case of Nicola Bulley. This is a 45-year-old lady from the local area who sadly went missing last Friday morning at about 9:15 a.m. She was last seen walking her small brown dog on the towpath of the River Wyre. The dog was found about an hour later, as was her mobile phone. So her family are very concerned, as are we. We've mounted a really intensive operation to try and find Nicola, including a number of specialist officers from our Northwest Underwater Regional Search Unit and specialist investigators who are supporting the family, as well as a lot of partners like Bowland Mountain Rescue, Lancashire Fire and Rescue and others, and the Coast Guard. We thank them very much, as well as local people who've turned out in force, who are obviously equally concerned for Nicola. And we appeal for anyone who may have been driving through the village of St Michael's last Friday morning at about 9:15, or who may have dashcam footage that could be of use to us, or people who may have been dog walking in the area or on the towpath to come forward. They can ring 101, or if they have a sighting of Nicola, 999.
Yes, well, police are asking for any assistance, any information to be called for on 111 or in an emergency 999. But they are stressing that for anybody who is concerned and wants to help, not to put themselves in risk of danger, because, of course, this is along the River Wyre and there are quite steep banks here along the river. So they don't want anybody else to put themselves into any sort of danger as they might be looking for Nicola.
Will Hollis, thank you very, very much, bringing us that report from Lancashire. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys, on GB News, and I have got a rip-roaring final half hour for you, ladies and gents. King Charles has reportedly asked the Archbishop of Canterbury to offer an olive branch to Prince Harry and invite him to his coronation, believe it or not. Good plan, or would Harry and Meghan's presence overshadow the event? Do you want them there? Should they stay away? And another biggie. Aren't we now just a piggy bank for Channel migrants? GB News can reveal within the last year, asylum seekers have received payments of almost £160 million. That's of your money through these government cards. The Aspen system, which stands for Asylum Support Enablement Card, is a payment scheme that offers asylum seekers a subsistence allowance. Basically, it's pocket money. Our Home and Security Editor, Mark White, will bring you the very latest on that. Keep your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. But now it's Polly with your headlines.
Patrick, thank you. The top stories: firefighters and control room staff have voted for their first nationwide strike over pay in 20 years. The Fire Brigades Union said its members have experienced a 12% drop in real terms earnings since 2010. Last November, members rejected a pay rise of 5%. And teachers are planning to go on strike in England and Wales after last-minute talks between unions and the government failed. The National Education Union says there's no offer from Gillian Keegan on trying to bridge the gap. Teachers are planning to go on strike on Wednesday in a dispute over pay and conditions, and it's expected to be the biggest day of industrial action in decades, with up to 500,000 public service workers, including train drivers and civil servants, also taking action. The Health Secretary has announced £1 billion in funding to boost NHS frontline capability. Steve Barclay says the government will work to bring response times to pre-pandemic levels. The plan also includes 5,000 more hospital beds, 800 new ambulances, as well as expanding urgent care to take place in people's homes. Labour says, though, the plans aren't enough to tackle the problems. And the Prime Minister's been defending his handling of the Nadeem Zahawi row, saying he acted decisively. Rishi Sunak has been under pressure to reveal what he knew about Zahawi's tax affairs. The Prime Minister says he sacked the Conservative Party chairman yesterday after the ethics inquiry found he had committed a serious breach of the ministerial code. And the US Secretary of State has called for an easing of tensions while on a visit to Jerusalem following a spike in violence in the region. Antony Blinken says it's everyone's responsibility to calm tensions rather than inflame them. On Friday, Israeli forces killed 10 Palestinians, most of whom they say were gunmen. It follows a Palestinian man who carried out a gun attack in East Jerusalem, killing 7. Those are your latest news headlines on TV, online and DAB+ radio. We're back in half an hour. Right back now, it's back to Patrick.
All right, let's crack on. The King has reportedly leaned on the Archbishop of Canterbury to ask Prince Harry to attend his coronation. The monarch is said to hope Justin Welby can come to some sort of agreement with his two sons that would allow the Duke and Duchess of Sussex to attend the coronation in May. The King is said to believe Harry and Meghan's absence would be more of a distraction than if they both attended. I am joined now by the wonderful former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, Gavin Ashenden. Gavin, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Are you flabbergasted that the Archbishop of Canterbury has been brought in as some kind of mediation device for Prince Harry and his brother and indeed his father?
Well, I am, and I'm not. I'm flabbergasted that anybody thinks any good can come out of this. I'm not flabbergasted in the sense that the Archbishop presents himself as having great skills in this area. But I think I'm with William. I don't think Harry can be trusted not to pull some kind of stunt. After all, he and Meghan depend entirely on publicity, and I think before they were capable of being invited to such a public space, they should show that they've become trustworthy. And I don't think there's a time or the opportunity to do that. So I think the whole thing is doomed.
Now, you, in your capacity as former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II, presumably our late great Queen wouldn't have gone grovelling to a want-away son like this after the firecracker accusations that he'd levelled at the royal family.
I think poor Charles should be a bit more courageous. I think the nation will understand entirely that he has a rogue son and his family is slightly dysfunctional. The rest of us have mainly got dysfunctional families. We're sympathetic. He represents us. I think it'd be far better to have clarity rather than some kind of cosmetic, nice patch over than the whole thing. I think it's just best to accept that Harry and Meghan have gone, and they go on with the people they can trust who are left.
I can't help but wonder whether or not he's chosen the Archbishop of Canterbury to try to get a balancing act between the two brothers. William allegedly has a bit of a temper on him and presumably will not blow up in a physical sense in front of an archbishop. Harry, from where I'm sitting, and this is just my personal view, has a massive problem telling the truth. One would assume that he wouldn't necessarily lie in front of an archbishop. So potentially, in that regard, the Archbishop of Canterbury is quite a good choice for both of these brothers. The overarching point, though, is would it just be better if he just stayed away? Harry surely doesn't want to come, does he? Because we live in a horrible, racist cesspit of a country full of idiots, and he doesn't like his family.
Well, you've raised so many points. First of all, Meghan had no difficulty lying in front of the Archbishop when she said he'd secretly married her a few days earlier. So I don't think we can put much store by that. And secondly, I think, yes, I think you're right. It would just simply be better if he didn't come. I mean, the other problem is, of course, that Harry and Meghan have attacked both William's wife and King Charles's wife. It's not just between William and Harry. They've been very rude to Camilla and very rude to Catherine. So it's not just a matter of stitching up, of getting William to be more patient and Harry to be more trusting. The whole thing is much more broken than that. The problem is that Harry and Meghan have broken every piece of trust you could imagine, and they're really not safe. So I think they should be kept away.
Yeah, exactly. And potentially the Archbishop is also a good choice as far as Harry's concerned because he's a bit woke. isn't he? Gavin, thank you very much. Gavin Ashenden there, the wonderful Gavin Ashenden, former chaplain to Queen Elizabeth II. Right, let's rattle through this now because this is a cracking story and I know it's got a lot of you up in arms. GB News can reveal that asylum seekers received payments of almost 160 million quid. In your money, by the way, my money, everyone we know money, taxpayers' money. Last year through a government debit card system. Here to talk more about this now is Mark White, our Home and Security editor. Mark, a lot of people up in arms, 40 quid a week in pocket money for asylum seekers?
Well, we'd known, of course, that asylum seekers are given effectively pocket money to the tune of about £40 a week. What we didn't really know was just what that equates to in terms of all asylum seekers receiving this and how much they were paid out in the course of a year. We now know it was £159 million, 200,000. So almost 160 million pounds. Now, this has come about as a freedom of information request. A chap called Steve Laws, an activist that films small boat arrivals and other asylum-seeking issues for his blog. He wrote to the Home Office, wanted to know from the 1st of January last year to the 31st of December last year how much that would have cost, and they wrote back and gave this just shy of 160 million figure. And in those terms, it is stark because clearly £40 a week, it doesn't sound like a huge amount of money. But when you then add that up over thousands of asylum seekers over the course of a year, it's a huge amount of money.
And some people are saying, well, what's the alternative? These people have got to live. But the reality is they already get everything else paid for, do they not?
If they didn't get this £40 a week, they would still survive. It is pocket money because in terms of their accommodation, that's paid for. Their 3 meals a day, that's paid for. Their medical bills, they're paid for. Their clothing is paid for. They get bicycles that are donated to them. They get other items that will help them out, such as mobile phones. So their day-to-day living and existence would still go on, but on top of that, they're given £40 a week, which is to say, over the course of a week, doesn't sound like much, but it's pocket money.
And you add it to the 6 million or so quid a day that we're paying for hotels and the rest, by the way. Mark, just lastly on this one, is this going to get any better anytime soon? Because I understand the predictions for the amount of people coming over the channel are pretty stark, and if we're paying them all 40 quid a week as well, it's a lot.
Well, just shy of 46,000 people came across the English Channel last year. The Home Office officials were actually planning for potentially 60,000, but they were saved by bad weather towards the back end of last year. It's continued on into the month of January, so that means that we are now at just shy of 1,200 people who've come across the channel. Now, that means that actually we're slightly less than we were at this period last year. But when the weather improves, the numbers will be back. And again, they're planning for the potential of twice that number of 45, almost 46,000 coming across the channel. We don't know how it will pan out weather-wise for the rest of the year. But if they get a good year weather-wise and there are plenty flat, calm days, then those numbers will rocket. There is no doubt about it. There are thousands of people still on the other side of the channel waiting to cross, and every day we get reports of many hundreds more crossing the Mediterranean into southern Europe to make their way north.
Mark, thank you very much as ever. Mark White, our Home and Security editor, bringing you some important news there. I think you have a right to know, don't you, as a taxpayer, exactly how much money, pocket money, every single week you are forking out for people in asylum seeker hotels. Joining me now is Fraser McLean, who is a human rights campaigner at Arise Foundation. Fraser, thank you very much. Your views on the fact that we're now dealing with a lot of these people in terms of 160 million quid a year, basically, to give them pocket money?
Yeah, well, the government's response to this morning was to raise the evidence thresholds of modern slavery laws, despite being told by the Human Rights Select Committee last year that was a bad idea, and being told by a very senior police officer, Dame Sarah Thornton, this is a bad idea, because what it does is limit our ability to prosecute the criminal gangs. Now, their concern is that a number of these arrivals are lying about being victims of trafficking. Now, at Arise, we're very, very concerned about slavery victim resources going to non-victims, but at the same time, there's a bit of a misunderstanding about what our slavery framework does. It's not a backdoor to citizenship or settlement, and it never has been. And just to explain this, a lot of victims of trafficking in this country are forced into criminality. So they might be in a marijuana farm or in a brothel, right? Now, for legitimate victims who are actually affected by what's happened this morning, they've got plenty of reasons to not contribute to the prosecution of the gangs, usually because they're terrified, right? The really important point here is one of the big protections they had was their criminality being suspended because of the gangs that had.
Fraser, I get what you're saying. If you're being really honest, hand on heart, how many people do you think lie about being modern slaves?
Well, the numbers of people who are claiming it's very, very small compared to the actual numbers of arrivals. So this isn't a big problem, but it's going to cost us in our ability to prosecute gangs. Patrick, it's really important. There's enough reasons for them not to come over already. And the fact that they were protected from their own forced criminality by the justice system allowed us to go after and help prosecute the drug gangs and whoever else, everyone engaged in human trafficking. This has been, the government were told last year by multiple sources, this is a bad idea. And this won't help the small boats crisis, I can promise you.
Are there human rights groups, I'm not putting yourself in this, by the way, but groups such as Care for Calais, who copped it last week, who, frankly, could be doing a bit more to help stop the crisis in the Channel? They appeared to be, some would argue, although they would deny it, aiding and abetting the Channel migrant crisis. Your views?
It's a subjective matter. I mean, that's not what we do, but also the law change this morning is about slavery. So that's not really their concern. Our point is that we are already struggling to prosecute trafficking, and the government, in trying to look tough on small boats, hasn't helped.
OK. Look, Fraser, thank you very, very much. I don't think we've spoken before on this show. I would like to talk to you again at some point in the near future, have a little bit of a longer chat when I'm less pressed for time. But, Fraser, thank you very, very much. Fraser McLean there is a human rights campaigner at Arise Foundation. Right, you're with me, Patrick Christys. Coming up, a Canadian theatre is holding an exclusive performance for black theatre-goers only as part of their programming for Black History Month. The concept has sparked a big debate online. Is this really progress? Is this going to happen over here soon? I'll be back in a moment.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank. My father didn't love me. So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Mark White. As GB News Home and Security Editor, I cover those key issues that are so important to you. Our authorities, our communities doing all they can to combat violent crime. With the public services under unbearable strain, why are we still failing to control our borders? Defence, the first priority of any government, has been continually hollowed out. Can we trust our politicians to protect the armed forces? Join me, Mark White, on GB News.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every weekend, it's Mark Dolan Tonight. Bigger and better, starting at 8 p.m. Friday and Saturday.
Can't be too safe. Bring it on. Has there ever been a more innuendo feature?
And Sundays, we're on at 9.
It's ridiculous. Just get on with it. Maybe you should get a proper job.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, people, look, we've done your strikes, we've done the Harry and Meghan stuff, we've done what's going on in the channel. I just thought I'd mix it up a little bit towards the end of the show, bring you something that you might not have seen and that you might not have heard of, and something, frankly, that I've got concerns might be happening over here very soon, because a Canadian theatre is holding an exclusive performance for black theatre-goers only, as part of their efforts to mark Black History Month. A National Arts Centre in Ottawa says the purpose is to allow for conversation and participation to be felt throughout the theatre, and admission will rely on an honours system. So it's already a little bit weird, but the event has been fiercely debated online for the obvious reasons, really. Critics arguing that it's racist in itself, only black people allowed. Supporters, though, pointing out that people of all races can attend the play during any of the 8 other showings, so it's a bit of a one-off. Let's talk now to Dr Alka Segal-Cuthbert from the anti-racism organisation Don't Divide Us. Great, thank you very much. Where do you stand on this? Do you think it is in itself racist to only allow black people into a theatre?
Yes, I think it is. I think also you said it might be happening in the UK soon. I hate to tell you this, Patrick, but it's happening now. That's why Don't Divide Us exists, and I hope to come back and tell you about our petition we're about to launch. But on this particular issue, I mean, yes, it is socially divisive. It's ethically repellent, and it's politically dangerous, actually, because this isn't just a one-off theatre, you know, a bit of a wacky theatre, you know, having a bit of a blippy moment and doing something wacky. The beliefs that are underpinning their actions are now being institutionalised across schools, academia, culture, not just in Canada and America, but here as well.
Yes, indeed. And people clearly think that they're doing a good thing for racial justice and progressive politics, I suppose, really, and furthering, I suppose, racial ideology. But I would argue it's segregation, isn't it?
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at the, you know, you look at their justifications in that article, I think it was in the Daily Mail. I mean, they talk about providing BAME people the opportunity to have conversations amongst ourselves about the kaleidoscope of the BAME, of the black experience. But I mean, that's just so patronising. If I wanted to go and have conversations with you know, my fellow Indians, I'd go out and have them, right? I don't need institutions to be bending over, you know, altering all the norms in order to accommodate what they think I am. And by the way, not all black people or BAME people or Asian people think the same, as neither do all white people. I mean, it's just such a patronising idea.
Quite, and frankly, a lot of them as well, and I know this from personal experience, people saying, well, I don't need help. Thanks for your quotes-unquote help, but we don't really want it or need it. It's doing a lot to highlight the issue. And as you say, it is already happening over here. Just a quick example of it, please, before we have to go, I'm afraid.
Absolutely. Well, there's currently a doctoral research experience programme being supported and funded by the university's United Kingdom Research and Innovation Programme, a major, you know, at arm's length governmental body that's open to only black students. I mean, what is that if not segregation?
No, indeed.
We have it in schools. We have it in schools as well.
Yeah, we do. Look, sorry it's short and sweet, but as ever, I always massively overrun with my timings, I'm afraid. One day I will learn professionalism, but I will have to get you back on. It only gives us another excuse to talk again. Dr. Alcacer Cuthbert, thank you very, very much for the anti-racism organisation. Don't Divide Us. Thought I'd leave you with that one, ladies and gents. You might have missed that on a lot of the other outlets, but there we go. Now, it's Jubes & Co. who's with us here in the studio. Michelle joins me. What's on your show, Michelle?
Hello, Patrick. Got lots coming up tonight. This whole Aspen card business is a funny one, isn't it? It is dividing opinion. On my panel, I've got someone who says it's outrageous. I completely agree, but he says it's outrageous because it's not enough. 160 million, not enough. Goodness me, Patrick.
Yeah, indeed. And as well, a lot of people say, don't they, well, hang on a minute, what would they do without it? And Mark White said, well, they get the food and they get other things, but I suppose it's open for discussion and open for debate, isn't it? Which is no doubt what you'll be doing, Michelle. Indeed, yes, we will. We'll be getting into that and more, by the way. I expect you to be tuning in and watching or listening, Patrick. I'm going to test you on it tomorrow. Yes, well, I'm going to be all over this show. I always am. I'm glued to you. I always waste half of my life. I get moaned at home because I'm always here watching your show. Anyway, Michelle... Did you just say you waste half your life watching my show? It's not a waste, Patrick. Waste was the poor turn of phrase. Waste was the poor turn of phrase. I enrich. I enrich. Right, OK. Thank you very much, everybody who's been tuning in. Got me out of trouble there, didn't we? Right, OK. I've been Patrick Christys. I'll be back again 3 p.m. See you in a bit.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8". My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing! You see, amazing!
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you